Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole for April 29th. If you could please call the roll.
Councilmember Wood?
Here.
Councilmember Spatafor? Councilmember Spitzley? Councilmember Hussein? Councilmember Washington? Councilmember Garza? Councilmember Dunbar? Councilmember Jackson?
Let the record reflect that Councilmember Jackson does have an excused absence at this time. Having said that, we have minutes from April 22nd. Vice President Spatafor.
Madam President, I enthusiastically move that the minutes from April 22nd, 2019 be approved.
Well, we're glad that you're so enthusiastic, and so we now have the minutes. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. With that, this is opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to make public comment, please come to the podium at this time and state your name for the record. And this is your opportunity.
Loretta Stanaway, budget. Okay, I didn't go back to check and see if any late arrivals came in, but I did not see any supporting documents for the mayor and community media or downtown Lansing Inc. on the table back there. And as far as LEDC, the only comment I want to make there is that I still really, really hope that there can be some way that grocery store will be referred to as the Capitol Corner Market versus the Capital City Market, which is a slap in the face and an insult to those of us who put time and energy and effort into trying to preserve the actual city market and that care about that. The Red Cedar floodplain insurance mapping assessment, I hope you guys find a way to not put that burden on those residents and homeowners. That will be something that is going to be catastrophic for most of them, and they're already just barely surviving as it is. On the overview, one new administrative position at $60,000 for neighborhood and citizens engagement. I really got to question that one, folks. And of course, we've had the debate about the utility bill for the green energy, and where that goes is anyone's guess, but the majority of people I've spoken with do not want to see that take place. They also don't want to see increases in recycling and cart fees. And just as passing mention on the LEPFA, if these numbers are verifiable, and I presume they are, then this just goes to show, it gives proof to the fact that golf was and could have been and is now apparently profitable now that it's been permitted to be so. Any and all of these changes and improvements could have been done at any time in the past if profit was the actual goal instead of purposeful ruination under the previous administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments at this time? Any other public comments? Seeing none, that will take us into the presentations. The first presentation that we have before us this evening is the mayor and the community media. I saw Dominic come in. If you'd come up to the table, please. And we'll start off with the mayor's budget, then we'll go into the community media.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, council members. I intend to be relatively brief. Our budget is basically personnel and operating. It's relatively small, and it really serves to fund the initiatives and the priorities of the mayor's office. You can see there's not a significant change from last year at all. There is a significant personnel change because Nick Tate, our chief labor negotiator, is paid from both the mayor's office and the city attorney's office. I have to say to you, council members, I know you approved that chief labor negotiator designation. I have to thank you. Nick is a integral and very important part of the mayor's office team, and so we really appreciate your approving that designation. Otherwise, we have the same number of staff that we had last year. We are moving forward on a number of priorities and initiatives that the mayor has put forward, including new initiatives such as the Veterans Commission and the Interfaith Advisory Council and things like that. So really, I would just leave it up to you for any questions about our budget. Again, it hasn't significantly changed from last year, and so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the mayor's office? Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. And I can appreciate that your budget hasn't really changed. I mean, every other department has brought forth, and we got a presentation last year. I'm just wondering why we didn't get one this year.
I didn't do much more of a presentation last year, but I'm happy to. I mean, I know we meet with council members regularly. The mayor's initiatives are very public, and so I can certainly put together, something that wraps up what he announced in the state of the city, something like that, but we haven't, to my knowledge, done a significant presentation in the past.
I think, and I don't want to speak for Councilmember Spitzley, but I think part of what we see is the public also likes to be able to look back and see what things were accomplished the year before, what goals that you have set forth for the coming year, and it might not mean that there are significant budget changes, but knowing what that performance measure is and what you hope to achieve. And I think that's what we were looking for. And Councilmember Spitzley, am I?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be critical, and I'm certainly not trying to be confrontational. I just think that, all the other departments, we've put forth our information, and, for the public, I think it's important for them to have something, to compare against. And I was just asking the question. I thought it was kind of odd.
Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. And I guess, Samantha, I'm looking for the same thing. It was my understanding that last year we kind of went on a we're new sort of budget, but we really were expecting performance-based, and it's not just this area. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing it in some of the other departments also. And I also want to know, where are we with the Sister Cities thing? They should have been self-funded years ago, and I'm not sure how much money we're still putting into that every year. And I'm also curious about the faith-based initiative position. I have, excuse me, I have a real problem spending taxpayers' dollars on church issues. And it doesn't matter if that's through the mayor's grant. I don't think our money should be going to churches for anything. I have a problem with paying somebody to reach out to churches. I just have a fundamental opposition to taxpayer dollars going to anything church-related. So I guess that brings in Bishop Maxwell. So what are we paying him, and what is he doing, and what are his performance measures? And it's nothing personal against Martha or Bishop, it's just our job is legislation and the purse strings. So we should be asking questions, and we should be making recommendations for changes to this budget. So if you could get me those things, I'd be appreciative.
Yes, of course, and I'm happy to break down those numbers. The mayor has put forth several new initiatives, including ecumenical and faith-based council, and Bishop Maxwell is also the liaison to our diversity commission as well. And so I wouldn't think of it so much as reaching out to churches in a faith-based way necessarily. It's engaging our neighbors in those communities
I still have a problem with that. If churches want to do things for the neighborhoods, churches need to do it themselves. Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? Councilmember Hussein.
I think just to add to the conversation, I'd like a better understanding. I think from 2013, I don't have it in front of me, but to 2016, I think there were 5 budgeted positions. I believe there's 7 now. I would assume that that is reflective of the additions of the citizen advocate, as well as maybe Nick Tate is included in that, I would assume. But just a better understanding of what we are actually, in terms of our taxpayer dollars, what we're actually funding in the office of the mayor. We, very visual, at least to the community, very visible is, the chief of staff, the mayor, and probably now the citizen advocate. But what else, are we funding within that office? And then what are the roles and responsibilities and things of that nature? Because it is a relatively small staff.
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to talk about that now if you'd like.
Absolutely.
We have in our office, I don't know how many positions were budgeted before we were here. If it was 5, then that's appropriate. We have, obviously, the mayor's in there. I'm the mayor's chief of staff.
Samantha, I hate to interrupt you, but could you let us know whether these are full-time, part-time, city employees or contract employees when
Yes, of
you
course.
are going through it? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I am the mayor's chief of staff and executive assistant, so under charter, I get to spend every Monday here with all of you, as you well know, and help the mayor, run all duties as assigned. It depends on the day. I never know. Obviously, I'm a full-time employee. We have Leslie McCarrick. Leslie is our office manager. She manages the mayor's schedule. She keeps us all going, honestly. We would be lost without her. Mark Lawrence, as our councilmember Hussein mentioned, is our citizen advocate. That was a new position that was budgeted last year, and Mark is our point person for citizens coming into the office. Something that's been interesting in the last year as we've evaluated the work that Mark does. Before this position, there was not a single point for someone to come into the city, and we've been discovering, in addition through some of the work we're doing with some of our community partners, including we have a U of M student sort of mapping constituent complaints throughout the city and where people go when they need something. We're a large organization, and that's confusing for people to, maybe have an issue with their neighbor and they call the city attorney's office, and the city attorney may say, and this is hypothetical, but they may say, we don't handle neighborhood complaints, and they may say, well, then I call economic development. So Mark is really, for the mayor's office, that person where people can always come, and everyone in the city knows him well, and he can navigate our departments and figure out the appropriate place to point people in the right direction. So Mark is also a full-time employee, as is Leslie. I'm sorry, I don't know if I said that. We have Marilyn Plummer. Marilyn is the mayor's community outreach coordinator. Marilyn attends every event that the mayor cannot attend. She is out almost every evening at different events, whether they meet neighborhood groups, whether it's presenting a proclamation on behalf of the mayor. She's kind of everywhere, and so she's out in the community a lot, working with neighborhood groups and with other groups presenting and things like that. I know she was presenting to the Jobs for Michigan program at the Lansing Center a couple weeks ago, so she's really sort of our community outreach person.
And
Also
is
a
that
full-time
full-time?
employee. Correct. We have, sorry, I'm doing the math on my fingers here. We have Valerie Marchand is our communications manager, and Valerie is a full-time position, and Valerie handles press releases, working with the media, press events, basically all things communication and media related for the mayor's office and others. We have, as mentioned, Martha Vegeta is the, I think it's special assistant, but she's focusing on international protocol issues and also now the veterans issues as well. So the mayor's created the new Veterans Commission. Martha has really taken that and run with it and has already been staffing that and pulled that group in earlier, or it was last week. So last week to have the first meeting, and so Martha is a part-time contract position. Bishop Maxwell is also a part-time contract position. He is the mayor's director of faith-based initiatives, and he does a lot of work with the community. He is managing our midnight basketball program. He's managing the Diversity Commission and the Mayor's Interfaith Advisory Council, and then other sort of other duties as assigned. I think we all do. And then, and Chelsea Coffey was the mayor's scheduling and policy coordinator. She just left our office to take a position in the governor's office, so we do have one vacancy that was a full-time position, and we're looking to assess that role and filling that position. And then we do have some interns and some other folks in our office, but they're seasonal, as usually college students.
Are there other questions? Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. Can you tell me what the percent increase, I'm looking at it, and can you tell me the percent increase in it's 1.6 is the percent increase personnel in your office from last year's budget, is that correct?
Angie, is that the exact number? That sounds about right, but
Yes, and it's actually a slight decrease from the 2019 adopted budget, and that is due to, the labor relations position that we just mentioned, Nick Tate, that is being split with the attorney's office this year. So that's the reason for the slight decrease.
So this year, you anticipate that becomes a full-time position in the mayor's office, or is it still going to just be, does he have 50% in the city attorney's office and 50% doing labor, or how does that work out?
It's far larger for mayor. I want to say it's maybe a 70-30 split. So the full position is counted in the mayor's office, but funding-wise, some of the funding is being funded out of about 30%, if I remember right, is being funded out of city attorney's office.
I just have one more thing.
Go ahead.
and I'm not gonna belabor this. I just, for me, you know, again, you know, this year, you know, I'm really disappointed that there's not, documentation, for the public, and just, you know, kind of a comparison. I get, and I see the numbers here, but I think that the mayor's office, like every office, and like our office as well, you know, has to come here and talk about what their changes are, what the costs are. You know, and I seem to recall last time when we did the budget, we talked about the faith-based initiatives, we talked about the sister city stuff, and so, you know, what I'm hearing is that both of those programs have been expanded. Now, whether or not I agree with them or not is kind of immaterial. I do know that that was a concern to a lot of members on council, and, you know, to just kind of come here and say, well, I'm just going to give a general overview of the mayor's office, I think is, I don't know, I'm not going to say disrespectful. I just think I think it's disrespectful. So,
Madam
thank you.
President, may I?
Okay, thank you. Are there other,
Madam President, may I?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Women's Spitz, I apologize. And I really think that our budget is almost entirely personnel and operating expenses, and a lot of the other, actually all of the programs go through the departments. And so it was certainly not intended to be disrespectful. It's that the programs are funneled mostly through the departments. And so it was, you know.
And again, we got the information, council got the information, so I have the information. But, you know, if someone comes up to me, a member of the public, they don't have that information. And if they do, then maybe I'm wrong. It might be on the internet or whatever, but I was just kind of surprised there wasn't any information provided today, so.
Councilmember Garza and then Councilmember Washington.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. Is there a place I can go? I would like to see what all the salary positions are, what they're being paid now. You know, I know that there was a raise increase, but I would like to see if you could send that to me, just so I can, because when we talk about retaining talent and hiring talent, you know, for instance, the electrician job and the plumbing job that's been vacant for a while, and they're in the low 40s, you know, and we're not getting anybody to, you know, I'm curious to see what the other department heads and whatnot are getting paid. So if I could get a copy of that, I'd appreciate that.
Of course, we can absolutely provide that for you.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, if we could have maybe going back to 2016 or 17, and then upwards of what the department heads, and I realize some of those positions have changed and morphed into something else, but if you could supply that, I think that would be helpful as we look across. Thank
Of course.
you. Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. And again, Samantha, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I'm still struggling with Martha and Bishop Maxwell. It sounds to me like things were kind of shoved under them to justify keeping them, and all of it together is still a part-time job. One person could have one part-time job. And I struggle, you know, it's business, it's not personal. And I struggle when it really looks apparent that it's just trying to justify both positions. We know Sister Cities hardly does anything, and this veteran board isn't going to do that much. And with it all together, it could be one part-time job. And the other thing is Jeremy, to your question, I know that the city employees, I believe, are going to. They don't have the contract done, but I'm thinking it might be about 2% is all they're going to be getting. So, you know, so I'll be interested to see those wage increases also. You know, we have a lot of debt, and we have to be very careful, and we have to make sure what we do makes sense. So I would have appreciated more documentation for my books, for me to refer to, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hussein.
Just a point of clarification, and so the question is for Councilman Garza. Is the ask for respective members within the mayor's office in terms of salaries, or department heads, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Okay. Mayor Shore.
Thank you, Council President. I apologize for being late. I was in a meeting, but I had this on downstairs, and I wanted to address the questions that have come up, if I may. I heard some of them, so I'm happy to answer any of the others that come up. I fully support my staff, and I think they do a great job. We do not support churches. We do not put any money into any taxpayer dollars into churches. We support what goes on at churches. We support what goes on in the community. The Office of Faith-Based and Community Services supports all of that work. So we have a lot of people who have meetings and things with pastors and at churches, and they do things through that community, and they come to us because they believe that the city and the faith-based community is part of that city. And Bishop Maxwell does a great job. He is here, he's a part-time employee, and most days he's here almost all day. Martha does a great job also. I will admit, when I came into this office, I had no idea the rigors of this office and what it means to be the capital city of Michigan. And people come here from countries all over the world. And I'm just a guy who served in the legislature. I don't know protocol. Martha is a fully certified protocol officer, which she did through her own funding. She has also been working with veterans for many, many years, and we wanted to elevate that. I believe that veterans, their service to me is incredible. And when I go to a Memorial Day event or a Veterans Day event and I see 20, 30 people, I don't think that's appropriate. And she pitched me on a Veterans Commission made up of veterans who are people in our community who are listened to, and she works with them now to make sure that things are going to change. So that's not sticking things under her role. These are the things that she has been here for. We increased her role, but we didn't increase her hours or anything like that. She gets here. I get here at 7:20 in the morning, and Martha is here already, and she stays till 3 or 4. It's more than her contract calls for, and we didn't increase her contract. I think everyone got a cost of living adjustment, so I think that's our increase. But I think they both do a great job. I think Mark Lawrence does a great job. I think Samantha Harkins does a great job. I think our staff does a fantastic job, and I'm proud of our staff, and I'm proud of what they do. I'll take the hit. I apologize that we did not provide a presentation. Councilmember Spitzley, I apologize for that. That's on me. We put out press releases almost every day, and all of this information is on the website. So I feel that we have been very transparent. Next year, we can put together that document and hand it out to council. Happy to do that, but that's on me. I feel like I missed something. You didn't ask, Jeremy you asked for the department head salaries. We give that to the media every year. Every year when we sign contracts with department heads, we give it to the media. I believe we gave our department heads last year a 2.75% increase, which I believe was less than our employees. But I know we give it to the media every year. Happy to provide it to council if you want that. I'm happy to.
Okay,
Thank you. I mean, sorry, am I on turn?
just a second.
Sorry.
A couple of comments. First of all, Mayor, I appreciate that you decided to come down during this questioning and presentation. I don't think anybody at this dais made any comments that were saying that your staff was not a good staff, and that we appreciate the work that they do. I think what we hear in the public are different concerns about what people are doing. Yes, you might put a press release out, numerous press releases out, but that doesn't always mean that the public is tuned in to reading LSJ or the City Pulse or seeing it on TV. I will tell you that my understanding, I just heard you say what you thought the wage increase was, and I can tell you what I read in a newspaper, which was between 9 and 11%, which is not what you just said.
For who?
For department heads and your staff. So that's why it's important, just because it's in the paper, it doesn't necessarily make it so, and we need to make sure that we have accurate information so that we can make sure that the public is aware of that. So our goal here is, again, no matter how many press releases you're doing, is this might be the only time or opportunity during a budget cycle when the public hears some of these things and retains them. So we appreciate, your explanation, and we appreciate the fact that, different questions that we're asking, that you're going to supply the information to that. And,
If I can amend something I said when you get a chance, I just realized I misspoke, for one thing.
okay,
For the department heads, they got the ones who had been here previously got 2.75%. The 3 or 4 that came in, I asked them when they came in to come in at a lower level than others. We gave them 4%, I believe. I believe we gave them. Do you remember?
I think it was around 4%, correct?
It was about 4%. So
Certainly was not
we gave
9% or
2.75 for everyone who had been here. We gave 4% for the 4 that had been here. My apologies for the misstatement.
okay. So with that, I've got Councilmember Garza, Councilmember Washington, Councilmember Dunbar.
Well, now I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
Sorry for speaking out of turn. Yeah, if it comes back to me, I'll answer. Thanks.
All right, we'll come back to you, not a problem. Councilmember Washington, Councilmember Dunbar, and
Thank you.
Councilmember Hussein.
Thank you, Madam President. I think your comments were actually geared toward me
few.
because I'm the one that brought up Martha and Bishop in the churches, and I do have a problem with it, and I don't apologize for having a problem. This is business. Your staff does a good job. Nobody said they didn't. And and if I thought they didn't do a good job, I'd tell you, and I wouldn't do it here. So, and I'm also not going to apologize, Andy, for saying I don't want money going to churches. I think it's inappropriate that they're taking money for Faith Family Fun Night and calling it for the neighborhood. I think it's great they do those things, but they need to do it with their budget. And I get churches need to do their own outreach without our financial help. So my point is, I get that membership is declining, and I get that they're scrambling for money to do these things, but they need to do it as their own outreach mission, and we should not be using taxpayer dollars to do it. And you know what church I'm talking about. You know what neighborhood I'm talking about. We don't need to drag it out here in public, and I can tell you which one later.
Okay.
But I
That
have
doesn't
a
cover my
problem with
budget.
it.
I mean, we're talking about the mayor's office budget.
I know,
I think we're
but
talking about the neighborhood advisory grants, I believe.
I'm talking about that, but when I say I also have a fundamental issue with paying somebody to reach out to the pastors for anything, the pastors should be getting together and coming to us without us having to pay somebody. I'm not saying anything about Bishop Maxwell. I like everybody up in there. It's not a personal thing, but our job is to look after the money in each and every department, including our own.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Dunbar, Councilmember Hussein, and Councilmember Garza, have you remembered yet? Okay, I'm sorry about that. Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. I have 2 comments. One, you bombard us with press releases. You do more press releases than anybody ever. So, just to say, it's not about them having to come here to hear it. If they printed something incorrectly in the paper, that's on the paper, and yes, that's the public's, they may read it incorrectly, but at the same time that the media gets those press releases, we get them. They're all in our boxes. So if we read them, we have the information. It doesn't need to be waited till it's during budget time for the mayor to present something, for the few people who are at home watching this to see it. We can all know that information, and when people ask us at neighborhood meetings and wherever in the public, if we're reading those press releases, we've got that information. Actually, we have it before the public does because the paper still has to print it. So at the same time that it's sent out, we all get it, so that's on us. We should read our press releases. The other thing that I would say is, as somebody who works in the nonprofit sector, who has worked with the Kresge Foundation, who has worked with the Kellogg Foundation, who has worked with multiple municipalities around here, we can't do everything that needs to be done to help our most vulnerable people in the community without the faith-based community. We absolutely rely on them. We would not have mobile food pantries if we didn't have the churches that were allowing us to do that. I go through funding cycles where homeless outreach and meals that are provided free, not just the food pantries, but meals, Many other ministries, we say ministries, but it's social outreach and it's open to everyone. The thing about the funding of anybody in the religious sector that provides social services is as long as their programs are open to the public, regardless of their faith, regardless of whether or not they listen to a message, regardless of whether or not they're, if everybody can access the services, there is absolutely no problem reaching out and working with the faith-based community to meet the needs of our citizens. And there isn't a dime going into it from the mayor's office. I have researched this years and years ago when it first started. It is a person who coordinates. And there are people in our community who do the same darn thing in the realm of nonprofits. They network amongst different nonprofits to try to have coalitions that aren't duplicating services so that they can maximize the outreach of what they have with the resources and the dollars that they have. And that's why we involve the faith-based community in all this. They have programs, they have services, they have things that they're doing, and we can all funnel our folks into that. So I don't want this to be construed that it is in any way city tax dollars going into faith groups that are promoting a religious conversion or anything like that. These are all for programs that are open to the public. There you go.
Councilmember Hussein, and then Councilmember Garza.
And I just don't want it to be construed as we are attacking again. And just to echo a few of the comments from Councilwoman Wood, the staff members you do have in your office that are being funded via this budget, because I for one have really appreciated the opportunity to interface with the folks within your office over the last couple of years. And again, not to speak about the prior administration, other than to say it's been a breath of fresh air. We really, really appreciate the work you guys do, particularly as we kind of collaborate to move people's circumstances forward. So I wanted to say that there was another comment I was going to make, but it's not timely now. In terms of the press releases, I'm glad to hear you say that the raises were 4%, because I will say that I believe it was reported that there was an 11% raise for the chief of staff, 9.47, I believe, for ED&P citizens and neighborhoods and citizen engagement. Sorry, and I think the other one was human resources.
Yeah.
So if it is, and the only reason we're asking that is because we are asked out in the public so often about those things, so we do need clarification. But I really appreciate the fact that our understanding is being driven by this conversation.
Okay. Councilmember Garza.
Thanks, Madam President. And that's pretty much what I was going to say. I mean, to touch base with what Kathy Dunbar just said, about the press releases, I do read those and I see those, but if they are giving out false information or inaccurate information, I don't want to be the one, passing that on to my constituents. So when I tried to find the salaries online, I couldn't find them. So I wanted to, make sure that I'm reporting, the correct information.
We'll make sure to get those to you, the ones, I guess, when we can give we can give as many years as you want. I'm sure Jim has the old contracts, but we can give what we gave when we first came in, and then the increases that we gave last year. Again, we had 4 that came in at a much lower level, and in my evaluation, they were doing a lot of work, and we bumped them up a little bit more than the others. The other thing I wanted to add from Samantha's presentation is that Marilyn Plummer also does all of our appointments. So I don't want anyone to think that she's just doing nighttime work. She's in our office all day. She does appointments, and then she does all of that nighttime work. Marilyn is a very hard worker, and I love her. I know that was left out. Appointments take up a lot more time than I ever thought they would, but they do.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Councilmember Spitzley.
Since I kind of started this whole thing, I just, again, and I'll reiterate what everybody said, there was no maliciousness or we never questioned staff or the presence of your staff. I think that it is important for us, and as we, go through this budget, I think everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants a safe city, we want all that, but how we get there is always where, the friction occurs. I don't think there's anything wrong with us asking for that information. I read every press release that comes along as well, but that doesn't mean that right here during a budget time, we can't ask for specific information. And, I'm going to continue to do that. I'm supposed to do that. You know, and so when someone asks me, my same thing is when I'm in Myers and someone comes to me and says, I heard that such and such got a 10% raise, or I read this, you know, I have to be willing, I have to be able to respond and respond correctly. I certainly don't want to say anything that, you know, casts a negative light on the mayor's office. I do appreciate the cooperation that we've had. It's been great. It's nice that the council is working back and forth, but again, our job is to ask questions, and sometimes they're not the most popular questions, and sometimes they're a little intense, but it's never malicious, and it's never, in my opinion anyways, and for me, it's never personal.
And I'm happy to provide any of that. I didn't know that was a question that you all had. Had I known that, we would have brought that. So I think in the future, if you just let us know if you have specific questions when we have a budget coming, we will be sure to bring those. This is the first that I've heard questions about a lot of this. So you can't answer what you don't know. So if you have questions, I would appreciate letting me know, and we'll bring those answers.
Councilmember Washington.
This is going to be my last comment, and I'm going to say very strongly, it's okay for me to not agree with something that's being done. I don't need a tongue lashing or an educational moment. I'm bright enough, I get it. And like we all said, it's not personal. I'm sorry that you felt it was personal.
I did not feel it.
You know, okay, good.
I did
Because
not at all.
you have no idea how refreshing it is to have a different relationship with the administration in this city. So it's okay for me to question. It's okay for me not to want money to go into churches. It's okay for me to have those beliefs.
Councilwoman, we
So-
can have an honest disagreement anytime. I think there's a lot of respect, and we can have an honest disagreement. I'm sorry if you all think that I didn't take offense at your comments. I just wanted to respond to what I heard. But no, I have tremendous respect for everybody sitting up here at the dais, and you all are doing your jobs, and I've been there. So we can have an honest disagreement on this one, and that's okay.
And if you want to look back at the January 16th, 2019 article in the Lansing State Journal, that might put some context to some of our questions. So we want to thank you for that, and we'll wait for the follow-up information as we've been with our other departments. That takes us in to the Community Media Center. Dominic.
Good evening. Ooh, I should know of all people. I don't have to be
Yes.
that close to the microphone. So, as you're all aware, the previous year we've been focusing a lot of our efforts on upgrades to this room that we're sitting in this evening, with some of the new equipment and ability to do presentations. And also a big focus that we had was accessibility, of course, with finally having closed captions on city council meetings and actually everything that we produce, including the shows that we make for all the different departments, LPD, LFD, parks, all of those programs have closed captioning now. So we're really thrilled about that, to have that ability for that portion of our residents who haven't had access to that before. So that was a big focus in the past year. We'll continue those upgrades to the chambers. That 3-year plan that we have in place for accessibility will culminate in having live captioning for these meetings that are happening live for people at home, so they don't have to wait, for a couple days. We already had, as you probably know, a day or two turnaround time between when a council meeting occurs and when they're available online on demand. Was already a turnaround time because sometimes meetings can be long, which results in a large file size. So that file has to travel through the internet and be available online. Takes time. But then now, of course, we are using the caption process, which is it's a human being doing the captioning, which also takes time, but that's a good thing because they're more accurate than some of the automated options. So beginning next fiscal year, we will have the live captioning happening for council meetings as well. So we're thrilled about that as well. The other big focus, other than here in the chambers for the next year, will be as we took over the public access from Comcast, over 8 years ago now, we started having the equipment that's available for people to use to produce public access programming. Some of those backpack studios, it's really happy to say and shocked to say I never would have thought, 8 years ago, I would say that we haven't had any theft of equipment or like loss of equipment or even major breakage of any equipment, like, cameras broken, normal wear and tear, of course, but no like major things that we've had to replace. But now, of course, this technology moves kind of fast. The equipment's 8 years old, so we're going to be doing some upgrades for some of that equipment in the coming year. So that's about it. I also happy that we have the capability to do enriched presentations here for you in the chambers, but I'm also embarrassed to say I don't have one myself. So I will also do one next year as well, now that I know. I also hadn't done a presentation in the past, but now that I hear you loud and clear that you would like one, so definitely do that next year.
Are there questions for Dominic? Councilmember Washington.
Dominic, here I see that your temporary help went from 105,000 to 10,000. That's huge.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Well, I think you remember that's because this was something we've discussed for a few years.
Right.
Turning those positions into actual part-time positions with the city instead of, so I think that's good for everybody. And I'm just really thankful to those people, including Faith here in the back, who's stuck it out as a contract employee for many years, so we're happy to be able to actually bring them into the fold as real city employees.
Is that it? Okay, Councilmember Spitzley, then Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam President. Congratulations on that. That's huge. Thank you for doing that. The other thing I think we had talked about was, and if you can expand a little bit, on some of our folks who come here a little hard of hearing, and I think you've put some headphones and stuff. Can you talk about a little bit what you've done to address that?
Absolutely. That was part of our kind of holistic approach of people who watch at home, having more access, and also the people that join us here on Monday nights to just have the best equipment we could for them. So we have rechargeable assistive listening headphone devices, and those are working pretty well. I haven't heard any complaints personally. I'm not sure if you have, but they're rechargeable, so sometimes that can be tricky, but I think they've been working out pretty well. So that's just a great option. We've been getting that request for a few years.
So are they just out there, or do you have to ask for them in advance? How does that work?
No, we make it, that's kind of part of, we just want it to be really easy,
Okay.
Friction-free for people, so they're just there right at the sign-in table, so you can just pick it up and use it.
And thank you.
Yes, right, of course.
Very, very nice. Thank you. Thank you. He got
So,
mics.
and all of these upgrades, I think you remember when we were planning them, have been with an
Yeah.
eye to, if City Hall does move, we didn't really invest anything in something that can't go with us. So if that happens, we'll be able to bring all these great new items with us. So.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Dunbar, then Vice President Spatafor.
Thank you. With regard to the closed captioning, I've not seen it, but is it something that is requested on the playback, or is it, I'm assuming it's not done live during, like, tonight, but maybe on the replay, it's available underneath?
Just so you know, the goal is that it will occur live. That's our 3-year roadmap to full accessibility will culminate in that. So, but currently, will only be the on-demand meetings that, so you have to wait a couple days, just like anybody else would, be able to click on and replay it. And it's just a button that you can click captions on or off. Unfortunately, we had to do kind of a bit of a temporary solution. The Vibit website, the citytv.vibit.com, that has all of the council meetings and the archive. That company is a local company, which is really great. It's not often that companies like that are local, but they're known as kind of a standard for municipal governments, and they're right in Holt. But they have said that their very next software update that they do to that online streaming platform will provide caption support. We didn't want to wait, so temporarily we've been uploading our council meetings to the other on-demand platform where all the other shows are. So, but we have simultaneously been continuing that Vibit site, because when it does become available, which should be any week now, month, I don't know, I hope, we're just going to activate that capability on all of the entire archive, going back 3-4 years that's on there, so.
Okay, and then, that's awesome. But to follow up with that, is it a digital platform like a Siri, like if I was to talk to text where it doesn't need a human typing, or is it like, is there a mouse somewhere typing all of this out? Like, I don't know how it works. I'm imagining somebody else might not know how it works either, but,
Sure. It's,
How's it-
we debated the back and forth, the best approach. Talking to people at the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, Annie Uraski, who was part of the effort working with us. There's a pretty big difference. There's a gap right now in accuracy of the captions. Like, if you turn on like CNBC or something and are watching those live, you'll notice if you turn the captions on, it's almost laughable, like how bad they are, right? I mean, it's like they're just missing words and sometimes just getting them completely wrong. But that technology is improving. So currently, right now, like this meeting, starting tomorrow morning, we use rev.com, which is they use humans to do the captions. So there literally will be somebody watching the meeting, creating a transcript, and this has other value because then you have a transcript, right? So that's helpful for the city clerk's office. It doesn't just have to be minutes. And so that's pretty great. And that's right now the best option for accuracy. But the technology is changing really fast. If you have been paying attention to like AI and all that stuff is really evolving rapidly. So the automated captions are getting better. So right now it's hard to predict that final option. We may end up using one of those software solutions for the live captioning, but currently it's a human being.
okay, cool, thanks.
Vice President Spatafor.
Two things, well, a couple things. Thank you for being here. I think the work you guys do is really great. It's nice that it's fresh content on the channel. I watch it at the Y and treadmill and those kinds of things, but really appreciate it. Questions for Angie, though, and it's not related to the IT budget. Fringe benefits, fixed and variable. Can you please explain the difference for me?
Yes. So we do break those out into two different categories in our what we call line item or accounting level detail. So the variable fringe benefits are those that follow an active employee, so healthcare, dental, those types of things. And if an employee terminates, that payment will change. It will cease. The fixed ones are both related to our legacy costs as well as our active employees. There's an employee portion of, say, pension and retiree health care for the active employee, but a person coming or going in a single year doesn't immediately impact it that same year. So if we have a change in a position, that won't change our pension contribution for that year. Now, in ensuing years it would, but it doesn't change it for that. So the fixed ones are those that are somewhat set for that year, if that helps.
You answered the question I was getting at then, because I'm looking at fixed, which I thought was what you explained it, so thank you. You must have explained it to me before. But it didn't go up considering the jump in payroll and number of FTEs that were city employees. I was expecting to see that change, but it lags, you say?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? A couple that I have for you, Dominic. And I know that last year that we migrated from the contract to the part-time employees. But when I look at the projected budget and what the end of the year projection is, were you short staff? Is that what happened, or what happened?
Trying to see exactly what you're talking about. So the
The budget that we have for you was $250,000, but the year-end projection is that you only spend $120,000.
Yes, so that transition is actually still in the process of occurring, I believe. So that's why
Okay.
it's not, it will be certainly completed by the end of the fiscal year, but I think that might be why.
Yes, that is correct, yep.
Okay. Is there a reason why they didn't want to go from the contract? I mean, I'm just surprised that July 1st, everybody didn't just switch over.
Yeah, I definitely can explain that. There was actually some people in the office who were debating whether, so the nature of like the video production industry or whatever, it's really freelance based. Like a lot of our contract people have, 3 jobs or something, that kind of thing. And it's not, in our business, it's not always the kind of, like they're doing it purely out of necessity. It's because they just love doing all different kinds of work.
Right.
So there's like value in the flexibility also. So I think, once they realized that wasn't really gonna reduce
their ability to do
flexibility,
other.
you know, because a lot of our stuff is like at nights anyway and the
Right.
weekends, and you have to be flexible anyway if you want to
Right.
do it. So I think that might be part of the transition. And also, there was just, in HR, there was, it's just a process, I guess, also on our end, so.
Okay, all right. And then, so that also answers why you had 105,000 in your temporary help.
Right. Yes, the Councilmember Washington referred to? For this last budget, right? Had 105?
Right, at the year end, it's projected at 105, even though we budgeted 8,000 for it. So what you're telling me, I'm assuming, is that contract positions were absorbed in that temporary.
Not yet, not
Okay.
yet transformed into the contract. Or the
Okay.
part-time employee
All right.
status.
Okay. I do know, and I realize whether this is necessarily budgetary or not, question, but I do know that we've had complaints about times that both live as well as what was taped and then replayed of music being played and not being able to hear council members' comments.
Right.
Was that able to be addressed?
It was, and so strange. I don't know why sometimes Comcast does what they do, but we found out that, I don't know if you have ever taken a deep dive in your television menus or not, but there's like SAP settings, second audio program settings, that you can access on your television. And for some reason, I guess, and usually it's for like a Spanish translation or something like that, but Comcast had it like tuned to a radio station. So, and it was really baffling to us because we actually, right in the control room, we have an actual Comcast feed like you would have at home. So we could check at any time the status of what's actually going all the way to Comcast and then back to somebody's home. That there's one TV in there that is that. It's like literally just a Comcast subscription cable hookup. And when we would hear that issue, turn it on and be like, there's no issue. You know, I don't understand what's happening. So we were able to finally figure it out, and that was it. And it was just like a choice that they made for some reason. And once we did determine that, then I plan on talking to, John Gardner, our person at Comcast, and just maybe, I'd rather have nothing than that, like how about just don't put anything on there, because I'm sure, like some of the complaints, like you were saying, were they're playing music to drown out the council members on purpose, and of course we would never do that. So, so yeah, I apologize for that, but it's just the setting. It's for some reason that's how they have it set, and I don't know why.
And then my last one, since you're in front of us, is we sent our pictures on to you, but we don't see them as part of the rotation yet.
New photos for council?
Yes.
Okay. I
So could you check into
apologize for that, absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
So they're just like all updated and you want the new
There's,
ones up?
there's nothing up there for it.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
you got it. No
Okay.
problem. And we usually have with the committee assignments and all that. right?
Yeah.
You want that as well, right?
Yeah, please.
Got it.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions? Seeing none, we want to thank you, Dominic, for being here and for the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us into Downtown Inc. And Samantha, it's my understanding that you are going to present that budget. And if you could give us a little explanation as to why, so that these council members have questions.
I sure can. Thank you, Madam President. And I do apologize, there's not a presentation for this one as well. And I will say it's because I wasn't entirely sure what to present, and I will explain that in a moment. As you know, Downtown Lansing Inc. is our downtown public service district agency, and Mindy Bilodeau has been the director of DLI for several years. DLI manages a number of events, big events that we all attend: Silver Bells, Forks and Corks, Taste of Downtown, in addition to all the Main Street program work that happens through that organization, which is certainly significant. Earlier, sort of end of last year, beginning of this year, the mayor made a decision to move Silver Bells from DLI to LEPFA. Silver Bells is a great event. It's been very successful. Everyone loves it. It takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and DLI is 2 staff people, and he felt that it was taking a lot of time to put on that event, and he really wanted to focus on downtown. LEPFA is a larger organization, has more capacity for large events, already puts on a number of events, and so it seemed to make sense to have LEPFA handle Silver Bells instead of DLI. As such, Mindy has taken a role with LEPFA to continue to work on Silver Bells. So Mindy is no longer, she has stepped down as director of DLI and is now at LEPFA, will continue running Silver Bells, which she does extremely well. And now the DLI board, chaired by J.V. Anderton. Can you give a wave, J.V.? And then Carl Dorsmer, chair emeritus, I guess. Last year's chair is here as well. So the DLI board is currently searching for a new executive director for DLI. I've been working closely with the board. JV and Carl and the team are doing a fantastic job. And so we had a meeting last week to talk about moving forward, making sure that gets posted as soon as possible. And I can say from the mayor's perspective and from our perspective, the mayor's goal for downtown is really to increase capacity after 5 and on the weekends. We have a lot of people here during the day, and you've all heard this complaint about downtown. You come down at night or on the weekends, and there's no one here. I almost feel bad for the new DLI director because I live downtown and I'm down here a lot, so then I get the, why is this not happening? And it's probably very annoying for them. But the mayor really wants to create capacity. But even more than that, I think it's about creating community. We talk a lot about some of our communities, you know, on Michigan Avenue on the east side, and on the south side, and Old Town and Rio Town, and these are communities that feel like communities, and downtown feels like the sort of this place you come to do something and then you leave. And there's a community downtown. I'm part of it, of people who live here, people who love downtown. And so really having someone lead DLI to create that sense of community. So not just for people who are here during the day, but also for nights and weekends. That's really the goal, and really the goal of the board is to find the right person for that position. And again, to continue to put on, you know, different types of events, but Silver Bells was just such a huge amount of time and effort that the mayor really felt it would be better served at a different entity. So we are in a transition phase, and I apologize, and I know that makes this a presentation quite anemic, and I am fully aware of that. But Angie can answer anything specifically about numbers. JV and Carl are here if you want to put them on the hot seat about anything, but they are volunteers. So, you know, I told them I would present, but we were really looking to just continue a lot of the work, the Main Street work, and some of the other events, but really to just kind of create that community. I think it's really the most important thing.
All right, thank you. Are there questions for Samantha? I have Councilmember Vice President Spatafor, then Councilmember Spitzley.
Samantha, thank you. First of all, I'm really excited to hear sort of the focus shift of DLI. I think last year when Mrs. Bilder was here, I talked about, you know, what happened to the things that we used to do, and I was given an answer that didn't quite sit well with me, but you all assured me that you had plans, so here we are today. The next thing I wanted to know, do you know how many FTE are at DLI? Angie may know that. Didn't see a move.
Including the executive director, I believe 6.
6 FTE, okay.
Yeah, and I don't think I don't know that they're full-time, though. I believe a number of them are part, I'm not sure about that.
Part-time folks, okay. And then why the difference, why is the budget so different year to year?
There are 2 main differences in the budget when you compare from last year. One is what we just talked about in terms of Silver Bells moving to LEPFA. That is going to be, when you reference the revenues as well as the expenditures, you'll see decreases in the promotions, both revenue and expenditures. That has to do with Silver Bells. And then secondly, the wayfinding project. It was a 3-year project that wrapped up this current fiscal year in terms of funding. So if you look at design beautification, you'll see a decrease there as well. Those are the 2 major changes in the budget.
Perfect sense, thank you.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. And Silver Bells is always a great time, so. But I do have a question. Maybe I'm just reading them wrong, Angie. So if you can, excuse me, Ms. Bennett. So if you can walk me through it, I'd really appreciate it. So on the presentation that was provided, the budget breakdown that was provided to us, it talks about FY 2018 actuals at, it looks like 1,015,000 and some change. And so I look at the FY 2018 amended budget at 9,775,000, the year-end budget at 1,061,000, but the adopted budget is 977, and it just seems like a big kind of discrepancy in the numbers that actually happened to the end-year projection. And it looks like the same thing that's happening on this budget. And so I'm just trying to figure out, you have a proposed, your FY projected in years 981, but the adopted budget was, 891. And then now your proposed budget is 634. So there just seems to be kind of a discrepancy in the adopted budget and in the year-end budget. And can you explain how that happens?
In general, yes. That actually does happen quite a few years. The change from the adopted budget to the projection at the end of the year, the increase there, you'll see it's offset by revenues. So revenues and expenditures are projected to be in excess of the amount budgeted. That has to do with promotional activities. So when DLI has more promotional activities and they raise more revenue than expected, that is tied to programs. So you'll be seeing in the year-end budget amendment, you'll be seeing that brought forward as offsetting by the additional revenues that were raised. And then for the next fiscal year, that reduction then back to $634,000, that has to do with Silver Bells
Yeah, I
going
get
to LEPFA as well as the wayfinding project ending.
Does that answer your questions, Councilman?
Not really, because I'm looking at the FY '28 and you talk about promotions, and promotions are actually down. But I'll just wait till next year, I guess, and see the trend. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hussein?
I actually had a lot of questions, and as succinct as your presentation was, it was pretty informative, so I don't have many. I do want to, however, when you look at fund expenditures, the organization line item, I just want to understand what that is for and why that's up almost $15,000.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have that information right offhand.
If you could find out for me, let me know. Appreciate it.
Does that answer your question? Organization. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question? Did you have any more? Okay. Councilmember Washington. Oh, you didn't have one. All right, I'm sorry. Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. Couple of questions. Is the grant income that is coming in for this fiscal year, do you know what that was allocated toward, the 43,150?
I believe that was the wayfinding.
That's the end of the wayfinding, okay. So that would be the third phase of that. Then special assessments, I'm assuming that's the business dues that pay in, depending on their district.
Yes.
The last line item in the revenues, the operating transfer, would we consider this basically a general fund subsidy to cover the costs of what DLI does?
That is exactly it. The difference between the projected expenditures and the revenues that are raised, yes.
Okay, now, I'm gonna raise this because we talked about how we're trying to get DLI back to doing what DLI does, or was designed to do as a Main Street program, just like Old Town, just like Rio Town, just like the Saginaw Corridor, just like Michigan Avenue. How many of them have a general fund subsidy to cover their costs?
Those are not city organizations, generally speaking. Those are other organizations, but
Okay. I'm just gonna say.
I don't believe that was what her question was. Her question was, of all those that she named, are any of them getting general fund subsidies?
I don't know if we have any monies that the city pays those organizations off the top of my head, not to my knowledge. I don't know if they do any grant type of things for those, but from an operating standpoint, generally no. Unless
Okay.
there's some grants. that are-
The reason I asked that is because it came across my mind, if somebody was watching this and heard you say, we're trying to get them back to doing what they were designed to do, which was and they were chartered in the same way by MISTA for Main Street, the way that the other ones were, I envision other organizations asking, why don't we get a subsidy? Why is downtown's DLI more important than the Rio Town or the Old Town or the SoCa or the Michigan Avenue?
And I might even defer to Carl to on this, maybe just with a head shake, but I believe that Old Town and Rio Town are the only certified Main Street programs.
Correct.
Yeah, they're the only certified Main Street programs. So we have a lot of different corridor improvement authorities, but they're different than the Main Street program. So that, I don't know if that nuance matters at all.
Okay. I actually wouldn't mind a clarification on that one. And I will hold my questions on the fund expenditures, because I think that Councilmember Spatafor might have a question that's in line with what I was just asking.
Are you done, Councilmember Dunbar?
It's not a question.
Is a statement.
Councilmember Dunbar, are you
Okay.
done?
I am, but I would like an answer on the Main Street issue, because
Carl,
it
could you come
matters.
forward on that, please?
Sorry, Carl.
Thank you.
So could you repeat the question for me?
The question had to do with which of the entities out there are Main Street certified and which are not?
In the city,
Yes.
there's Old Town is certified, and then the downtown is certified, and that's it.
Okay, Rio Town is not.
No.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
That answer?
I guess. I guess I had never really assumed that there was a $100,000 subsidy just for keeping that going. I'll hold my rest of my questions for a second.
Councilmember Spatafor, then Councilmember Washington.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on this, but I did work on this legislation before, and I think it's PA, it's 120 or one something, authorizes principal shopping districts as parts of the unit of government. So Old Town Commercial Association or the Rio Town Commercial, is it CA2, Commercial Association, is not part of the city of Lansing like DLI is. Now, there's a question about why they don't others don't receive a subsidy. We are allowed by law to give a subsidy to DLI because we've authorized it as a principal shopping district. Now, whether we can send a subsidy to those other organizations as well, that's a question for Mr. Smirka and a budgeting decision for this body. But the reason that DLI is eligible for a subsidy of any amount is because their funding stream is permitted by law to use local government funds or assessments raised through the business district. So I guess I'm kind of an expert, but not really.
All right. Thank you. City Attorney?
For the other organizations, basically, whether those organizations perform a public function for the city. I mean, there's a specific statutory provision that allows that type of operation. I wouldn't call it a subsidy, I'd call it a contract. Cities can create their own nonprofits for these organizations. So generally, it would be a contract for public function that's being performed by them.
Thank you. Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. I do believe this came up last year, and I do believe also that it was mentioned that at some point they were supposed to become self-sufficient, and I asked the individual that gave the presentation last year at what point did they think they were going to be self-sufficient, and I was rather rudely told that I should want to invest in our downtown with no explanation as to when they were going to be self-sufficient. And the city attorney, we are working with one of the other areas in the principal shopping district to perhaps make some changes, but we're working with Brian McGrain and the mayor and the other group. So maybe one day they'll be self-sufficient.
Are there other questions on this?
President Wood, could you, I don't know what's happening to your mics or what, but they're going down.
Okay, we'll try to make sure that they're closer so that you can be heard.
Voice, I can hear your voice.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this? Councilmember, Vice President Spatafor.
And I'm sorry, can you hear me, Mary? Yes. Okay. I might have missed this during the presentation. Do you know what the timeline is for the executive director search?
As soon as possible. We met last Thursday with the board. I'm hoping it will get posted this week ideally, or as soon as possible, and then another, I'd say, month or 6 weeks
Okay.
or so. I mean, and in a perfect world, and we obviously have to see what the candidate pool looks like. And if we do that happens well the first time, it will be short, but as soon as possible.
And what's the day-to-day plan right now? Who's the king or queen?
Technically, JV is running things as board chair right now. He's also a full-time attorney, so a little busy for him. But then Lena is the other full-time employee who works for DLI, and so it's a team effort.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Are there other questions? A couple that I have for you are, is there any fund balance in the Downtown Inc.?
Yes, it
Um,
is portrayed on page 33 of the budget book, and it is projected to be 38,000 at the end of fiscal year 20.
Okay, so they have a fund balance, but we're also subsidizing them by 90, this proposed budget is 93.
That is
Okay.
correct. The fund balance there is obviously for unanticipated things that might happen during the year, but you'll also
Yeah.
see that there's a drawdown of fund balance of about almost $16,000
Yes.
in light of that subsidy. Yep.
My next question is, I know that the assessment has not changed for some time. Has there been any thought about changing the assessment?
That assessment actually was changed, I believe, a year ago. Is it maybe 2 years ago? There was an increase in the PSD section or District A.
I saw your board chair out there shaking his head. Could you come to the podium or there with Carl? That'd be great.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
And so my question was, has there been any thought about changing the assessment?
I was nodding because I was in agreement with her. The assessment was, I don't know if it was 1 year or two, but was recently raised after, I think, better part of 20 years of a status quo assessment. I think it's 3% a year on the increase. And I think that expires in either another year or two, depending on if it's been 1 or 2 thus far.
Okay.
I suspect in another year or two, we will be in front of you, seeing if we can extend that again.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. Was that only raised in one district, or was it raised across the board in all of the districts?
Only raised in one.
I believe it was only District A,
Yeah.
Okay,
not in B or C.
so maybe that's something to consider too.
Okay. Anything else? We want to thank you. We appreciate you coming down and going over your budget with us. Thank you very much. That takes us into Mr. Tresice. Carl,
I'll be giving
Bob
the
is not
presentation.
here. Okay,
He's
you
not.
and Chris and the rest of the guys are going to handle this one? All right. Guys and gals. We do have a presentation on this one.
There is a
Looks
presentation.
like we got a couple of them.
It looks
you.
like this. up
Yep.
front.
Okay, Carl, go right ahead.
All right, before I begin, I'd just like to introduce Anum Mughal and Chris Klein. They're with with LEAP, and the three of us combined essentially focus on servicing the contract with the LEDC and the City of Lansing for economic development services. So in front of you, or in your packet, hopefully on the screen too, there's a presentation, just brief, that I'll go through. And the first,
Just a second, Carl. That's the wrong presentation that you have on the screen. If we could get that switched out. Thank you. I know. Okay. Just give us a second here and we'll get you up. Do we have that presentation? What'd she say? Show, okay. Apparently she doesn't have it. I'm not sure why. I know staff sent it, so let's begin anyways. And if they find it, then they can catch up with us.
Council members have copies, though?
Yes, council members have copies. And there's copies for the public. It's just our viewing audience that won't get an opportunity to see this.
Okay, I will begin. Turning to page 2. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about, there's 3 corporations essentially. There's the LEDC, there's the Brownfield Authority, and then there's a TIF, a Tax Increment Finance Authority. The Lansing EDC was established in 1976, and it provides economic development services to the city of Lansing. And for the upcoming fiscal year 2019-20, there's 5 major objectives, and that is, number 1 is to provide business expansion, retention, and attraction services. The other is to facilitate real estate and what we call place-based development projects, and we've kind of split our projects into those 2 categories because you have the traditional business expanding, you have like Neogen and Emergent Biosolutions, General Motors, small startup businesses. So traditionally, that's what we worked with, but over the last few years, there's been a lot more brownfield redevelopment and mixed-use type development, like the Capital, I'll say, Corner Market, and some of the other projects. And so we've kind of split, we've recognized that, and so made that split in terms of our objectives, and we keep separate numbers on those 2. And then 3 new things, really relatively new things, is the facilitate the corridor improvement authorities. And currently, there's 2 existing ones. There's East Michigan, and there is West Saginaw. And then there's 2 that we're exploring to see if we can put one together, and that would be the North Grand River, kind of the northwest as you go up toward the airport area, and then South MLK. And then also, something relatively new is the promotion of the city's opportunity zones. This is something that's relatively new with the new tax law that was approved at the federal level. And so opportunity zones were designated within the city, and those were trying to attract investment to those particular areas, and then we're working hard to attract investment to those opportunity zones.
Carl, before you go further, Councilmember Garza has a question.
Thank you, Madam President. Last year, Adam Hussein and myself did a joint contact meeting. I think it was in May or April of last year. We had Bob Trezise down talking about it, and I know the opportunity zone was pretty fresh and new at that point in time. He couldn't really give me any inclination as what was going on with, at least in the south end of town. Do you have anything going on? Did you have any business opportunities for the opportunity zones in the south side?
There are opportunity zones in the south side, and then, as I mentioned, the corridor improvement authorities we're looking at in terms of getting down that area. And NUM was hired specifically really to focus on corridors. And the main ones obviously are a lot of them are in South Lansing. You have MLK, you have Cedar, and then you have others like Waverly. And so another one of our programs I didn't get a chance to get to is the facade improvement program. And a lot of that effort's been directed to the South Lansing area too. So, we recognize that South Lansing needed additional assistance and help. That's why, if you look at the map, and I think it's on our website, or you can find it pretty much anywhere by just Googling opportunity zones, Michigan or Lansing. We chose, the mayor essentially, areas in the South Lansing area to try and attract that investment. And on top of that, we have our regular tools like the Brownfield tools, Oprah, the facade improvement program. Typically have to use them all to make things happen. And we have had some success in South Lansing, and we look for more.
Okay, and just follow up real quick. I guess my question was, have you had any businesses take the opportunity zones advantage of the fact that, the capital gains?
Well, right now, they're just shopping for investors. Everybody's putting together their prospectus essentially, and there's funds that have been put together where investors who want to invest in opportunity zones put their money in. Now, some of them want to invest individually too, and they're looking for projects. So UNUM has put together a prospectus that highlights various sites in the zones within Lansing to market to them. And one in particular, believe it or not, where is in the south side is the former EDS site. The Midwest Self-Storage folks, they went through the process, got a brownfield plan approved, and they're going ahead and they're finishing the project as in the development agreement and the brownfield plan. But in the process of them going through this, they got approached by someone else that said, "You're in an opportunity zone, we'd like to buy your business." And so that opportunity, the zone itself created that. But others, like for instance, Logan Square is in an opportunity zone, and that's a very challenging property. Kmart is in an opportunity zone on the south side.
Go ahead, finish your question, Councilmember Garza.
Okay, thank you. So, as of right now, no business has taken advantage of the opportunity zone in South Lansing yet, other than
In all of
EDS?
Lansing, other than one
Okay.
potential sale.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hussein and then Councilmember Washington.
I think you somewhat answered my question, and it was a follow-up to Councilman Garza's. I guess I was curious as to whether the fact that we have opportunity zones that were approved at the state and federal level, if just by having those, we are going to, or we at least believe we might be attracting investors at some point, or are we doing things to intensely market these opportunity zones and the projects that Mrs. Num has put together? And I think that might be what the question was. What are we doing to actually market the fact that we do have these opportunity zones, they are open for business, we do have projects within those opportunity zones that could be funded, et cetera, et cetera?
The answer to that is a lot. We're doing a lot, put together the prospectus. UNUM has traveled all the way to California with the mayor to market those opportunity zones. There's others. We had our own regional conference to market those. And there's a lot of it's taking place on the web too. But the trick too is that the opportunity zone itself, just being in an opportunity zone, the benefits from that are not enough they'll make a good project a little better, but they won't make a bad project good. So what you have to do is it's one more tool, one more way to get people interested in investing. And, there are some examples where, yes, it by itself, for instance, you could look at the former EDS site and say, well, look, they came in and bought it. But the fact is, without that brownfield plan, that site wouldn't have been redeveloped, and without that happening, it wouldn't be attractive to an investor. So we feel that when you look at it in terms of, say, Logan Square, it by itself, making it an opportunity zone, it's still gonna be a challenge. But with the brownfield program, other programs we have, maybe some state programs, it depends on the use that's proposed and how much it's gonna cost. But generally, it's just one more tool in the toolbox. And it does provide us with a platform to advertise not just the opportunity zones, but Lansing in general, to invest your money.
Go ahead.
Okay, so because you brought Logan Square up a few times, so now a site-specific question. When we had Kevin and Mike Zhang in earlier in the year, did we round up every economic development expert that we have within the city and LEAP and sit down with those two gentlemen in a room and talk about the bag of tools that we have for them to redevelop that, to reconfigure that, to potentially raise and pull those properties back up to West Holmes and Logan? Or did we let them get back on that plane and take back off to California without meeting with them?
We talked to them, I think Chris did too, and Brian McGrain, but basically it would be our job to meet with them, and then obviously the MEDC and whoever else is interested, whether it be a financial institution, and they ultimately have to make a commitment to invest a certain amount of money into that property. So we do that, we show them the tools, we show them how they work, we offer the opportunity. If you're considering a project and you know what the numbers are, you know what you're going to invest, we can tell you how we can help you. And typically what it does is there's two ways. Either we can help lessen the upfront cost of the development, or we'll help the long-term operating costs. I mean, we all know that's a very challenging site. And so all the local developers are they know that site well, and they've had the opportunity to even bid on it because recently it went to auction, and they don't do it. Why don't they do it? Because they don't see the ability to make money on that. So the challenge is to be able to say, okay, we can help you either reduce your costs up front or in operating, something to help them make their case to be able to invest in it, because typically those investors are also looking at all these other properties too, and they have their choices where to place their money. So you have to make it appealing enough so that they say, I'm gonna take a risk here. I'm getting into this area, it's a challenging area, but if it pays off, it's gonna pay off big.
Councilmember Washington, then Councilmember Garza.
Thank you, Madam President. Carl, some of my questions have been answered. I wanted to know how many people have taken advantage of the Opportunity Zone. It sounds to me like right now, none. The other thing is I wanted to know how it was being marketed. And as far as the EDS site goes, I don't think that's, correct me if I'm wrong. We gave them a brownfield, they're going through with the development plan, and they're selling the building to a large marijuana processing company. And I'm not sure that's what the people want the brownfield and the Opportunity Zone to support.
Yeah, it's not marijuana, but Chris is much more familiar.
Yes, so I've met with prospective buyers along with Midwest Self-Storage and went through the process. It is not my understanding at all that it's going to be marijuana. In fact, they already have, the prospective buyers have self-storage buildings in other areas, other regions, and they look to just have that as self-storage. It's already built out as self-storage. They are not changing the use. Basically, at this point, the project will be completed as planned. The interior build-out is completely done. The exterior build-out will happen within the next month to 2 months. But yes, it will not be a marijuana growing facility. It's going to be self-storage, same.
Okay.
There might be some potential to do additional build-out in the outlot that we're exploring as well.
Okay, then maybe that company should have been a little more careful with what they were saying to folks that were talking to them, because a lot of that came from them. So, I'm
sorry.
Some of the information that I'm telling you actually came from them. And so I'm just saying I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad the neighborhood will be happy to hear it. The surrounding businesses will be happy to hear it also. And man, we got to get a lot of tools for that, the plaza across the street.
I think the importance of that, and with the Opportunity Zone as well, is creating that environment where folks want to invest. Now, with Logan Square, there might be a lot of opportunities to use incentives and other tools, but really creating that environment where, all the work that we're doing in Southwest Lansing, along Pleasant Grove and Homes, the EDS site, creating that environment where people are looking to invest. And I think the new buyers of Logan Square, they feel that at some point that environment is going to happen where they can, increase the vacancy. And so it's going to be a challenge. I don't disagree with that, but I think they do see some opportunity there, and we've met with them. They haven't chosen to pursue any tools at this time, but I think in the future we're going to continue having that conversation with them.
I really appreciate what you all do, and let's not forget North Lansing. It's kind of been no man's land for a very long time, and they could use some loving care too.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm doing a ton for North Grand River. Carl mentioned the potential CIA up there. There's a lot of targeted sites within our opportunity zones. I'd ask you, go on our website. I think it's purelansing.com/opportunity zones. Num put together a wonderful map of all the properties that are available, and they're all throughout the city, but we have ones targeted in each zone. So that kind of river corridor up North Grand River, there's a few sites up there that we're really targeting right now.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Garza.
Thank you, Madam President. Sorry, I know you guys have a presentation to finish, but now as we talk about like marketing and outreach, I believe you guys are doing a good job, but I think you guys could be doing a better job. And I mean no disrespect, sir, or any of you guys, but like when I'm obviously an advocate. I advocate for South Lansing, Southeast Lansing, which is Ward 2. And when we talk about RC Ventures, which is Edgewood Town Center, and Signature Associates, which is developing the new Panera. When I reached out to these people, these developers, and I asked them if they've talked to LEAP, they didn't know who LEAP was. So, and I know I made the connection with you guys, but I mean, when we have developers coming in that aren't from the city, I think it would be beneficial if they knew the different tools to be able to utilize like LEAP. So I'm just curious to know how we can do a better job of outreaching to these out of town developers.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Before you go forward, I think my only comment would be, especially with some of the conversation that we've had on the site, EDS site, excuse me, is, council approved a brownfield based on the company that came in and pitched their responsibility and how they had managed other properties and that. Now, if I'm not mistaken, in order to move this brownfield over to someone that would purchase it, you're gonna have to come back to council. But I'm a little disappointed with the fact that we have a potential of a buyer who we know nothing about and whether they will fulfill some of the agreements and the things that they pitched to both the Development and Planning Committee and the community. And I think that's, I understand that we've raised the value of that property, and so it's enticed people to come in and want to invest. But I think where we fall short sometimes is the fact that then we have people in here that we haven't had a relationship with. We don't know how they're going to manage the property and whether we're going to get what we were promised from other people.
To answer some of your question, first of all, they would have to come back. Well, in order to be able to even earn the ability to get reimbursed through the brownfield plan, in other words, the brownfield benefits, the project has to be completed by whoever and per the development agreement. So that won't even happen. Secondly, they can't, if they want to assign that reimbursement to a new buyer, they need the approval of the Brownfield Authority to be able to do that. So one of the problems is with any of our brownfield plans, I mean, any of them, even you look at like Red Cedar or something like that, it's impossible really to tell somebody that you can't sell that property at some future date, but the control that we retain, that the city retains in the Brownfield Authority is that incentive, that flow of reimbursement. And so the development agreement and the reimbursement agreement, what we need to do is write them, and in this case we did, that you don't get any of these benefits unless you complete the project per the agreement. So, right, the way it's gonna work on that particular site is they're gonna complete the project per the agreement.
And I get that.
And then they're gonna sell it. Now, it's really hard. The new owner, he may not be a friend of the city, we don't know, right?
Right.
Because we got a really good comfort level with the developer that's doing it right now.
Exactly.
And that's great. But the challenge is, how do you then tell them, we really like you, don't ever sell that? So it's a challenge.
And I understand that. No different than when somebody comes before us on a rezoning and sells us the moon and stars and apple pie, and it gets rezoned, and then they do nothing. They don't build on it, they don't do what they've told us, but now that has changed. The zoning has ended up changing. So I get that. They're not gonna get their money for, which I'm sure would be part of the sale agreement, that you have this brownfield money that's gonna be flowing back in. And I understand that, but it's just disconcerting to those of us up here on the dais that go out and market and encourage the public to be on board with something based on what we're hearing from the developers and those
Well,
that
the
come
project's
before us.
not gonna change from what was committed. The only thing that changes is the ownership changes. And that's different than the zoning where we are completely different use may appear, because the use is not gonna change at all. They still have to complete the plan as it was presented. The only difference is that when they're said and done, they're gonna sell it to somebody else who will operate it.
And I get that. I use that as a hypothetical with the zoning, as an example out there. But I think, again, my concern is the people that come in and pitch an idea to us, and then it's sold. And again, we don't have any relationship with those. We can't stop them from doing it. I get all of those things. I just find it difficult, again, as we're, from a council perspective, going out and meeting with the public on these things. Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. Do we give incentives to grow or processing facilities or
No, we
anything
don't.
like that? So what would happen if, and I guess I'm talking hypothetically as well, what would happen if we found out that the EDS facility went through, these renovations, and then turned around and sold to a processor facility? They would lose the opportunity to be reimbursed for brownfield. Is that correct or no?
I believe that's correct. We'd have to check the language that's in the development agreement to be sure of that, but yes, that would be the intent.
Okay, so that would be the intent.
Right, and that's the one thing that the Brownfield Authority and the city can hang on to. That's with that incentive, because it takes place over time, right? And in that case, I don't know how long the plan was. So if they, let's say, 2 years down the road, they change that use, would we be able to
Right.
withhold that incentive, just stop it?
Right.
essentially?
Well, and that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out is that, I get how the business runs, and I get that, they put all these improvements into a site or facility and then make it attractive to someone who comes along and wants to purchase it. I get that, and I understand that. I don't as much have a problem with that, but I just want to make sure that we're consistent, because that was the policy that I understood. Whether or not I agree with it or not is immaterial. But if we're going to do it, we just need to be consistent. So if that does happen, pending the language of the development agreement, so you guys don't have a written policy or just a general policy that won't happen? It has to be within the language of the development agreement?
Well, the city attorney might be able to weigh in on it, but the development agreement really specifies what they're supposed to be doing and by when, and what happens if they don't. So, and the reimbursement agreement has a little language in it. The brownfield plan also specifies what they're supposed to be doing, so it would seem to me that if they did something completely different, there'd be at least some grounds or legal standing to be able to say, no, you didn't fulfill what you said you were going to do, therefore, we can stop the incentive.
And just for clarification, are we talking development agreement, or are we talking universal development agreement?
Well, right now, we're just talking the development agreement. We have a universal development agreement, which is very close to being finished, but right now, we're still using the previous, it was called
There are
agreement
two
in-
different development agreements.
Right.
Development agreement where we have sold
Right.
property.
That's called
or-
a CDA, a Comprehensive Development Agreement, and that comes into play when the city is selling property, like
Yes.
Red Sea.
And the other one,
And the other one is just that was issued by an executive order by Mayor Benaro.
okay, I just want to
We're
make
still
sure that
using
we're
one.
talking the same language.
That's right.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney.
He's generally correct. So you have the brownfield TIF plan, reimbursement plan, I'm sorry, and, there's a project description in there. And if that's not being followed, then the reimbursement isn't there. It's also in the reimbursement agreement. And then you have the comprehensive development agreement. Then you have the universal development agreement. So it's the strength of all the language that's in the project description that's in all of those documents that would control. If they're not very detailed, or if there's room, then yes, the use can change.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hussein.
Yeah, I would just like further clarification when you get it, because my concern is that the brownfield tax capture is based on eligible activities, and there's always a project completion date, for instance, and then obviously we refund that over a number of years. I think there's a 30-year cap. And so my concern is that if the project is completed, and those brownfield eligible activities are funded and constructed, that they could be reassigned that brownfield benefit and then change the use of. And that's my concern. Obviously, we can't have a grow. It's a G2 wholesale. But there are 4 facility types, and they're lucrative enough to where I could see them changing course, still being able to make a go of it financially, and then obviously receiving the brownfield benefit for the eligible activities that were constructed by whatever date was in the brownfield plan. So I'm concerned too, for those reasons. But again, I don't know what's in the project description language.
It points out that we need to, the new universal development agreement gets at a lot of these, makes it easier to be able to quantify define that in terms, because the challenge is, how do you write the agreement to be able to get what you're, Because it's easy to be able to say, okay, you need to make these improvements, this amount of investments, this number of jobs, otherwise. But what happens after you do all that, you meet that requirement, and then a year later, then you'll want to change something. The challenge is, how far out can we reach on something like that? How far into the future? And what are our legal standing?
Councilmember Spitzley.
I mean, but that's the issue. Again, I don't have a dog in the fight, but the language of the development agreement kind of rules. And so, you know, I can't imagine that development agreement language, or even the brownfield language, I mean, if the eligible activities, if you're abating asbestos, or you're taking out lead or whatever, if all that stuff is done, you know, at the end of the day, what difference does it make about the end, what they sell it to? Because they fulfilled the contract of the brownfield agreement. They've done the eligible activities, and so, you know, to me, that's kind of a, maybe, you know, kind of a red flag, but at the end of the day, again, whether or not I care or not what the end use is, I just want to make sure we're consistent in what we're doing, and if we're telling people who are coming into the city that we're not going to give, you know, we frown on providing incentives to those type of development and business activities, and then this kind of goes under the radar and this happens, I think we would be, we could be in trouble, so.
The brownfield program is, its priority, its objective is to get the properties redeveloped.
Right.
Get them back on the tax.
Right, right.
The use is governed by the zoning ordinance.
Right.
And what it's zoned. So,
Right.
So for instance, if the EDS property, I don't know whether it's zoned to allow marijuana growing or not, but that'd be
Yes, it
the
is.
best way to control it.
Right.
Because then a new user couldn't just buy it and put marijuana in it.
Thank you.
Okay, if we can move on with your presentation.
All right, moving page 3 of the presentation. Most of you are familiar with the Lansing Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and we just talked quite a bit about it, but really primarily it is to redevelop blighted, functionally obsolete, and contaminated properties. And we use TIF financing, and we also have our local revolving fund to finance activities such as environmental cleanup, demolition, site preparation, and installation of public utilities. And then moving on, some examples of some of our projects that are either currently coming out of the ground or were approved is on page 4. The first one, upper left-hand corner, is Rotary Park, and that's on a brownfield site. But what's interesting about that is each brownfield plan, we take a little bit of the annual capture and put it into a fund. And we can use that fund to do various activities on brownfield sites. So we put, I think it's approximately about 400,000? 343 into helping create this project, the Rotary Park. So it's a way to be able to take some of those taxes and benefits and use them to do public improvements that benefit everybody, not just the developer who's getting the reimbursement. So that's why we take a little bit each year.
Carl, I've got a question from Vice President Spatafor.
I don't expect, Carl, thanks for being here. I don't expect you to have all the information I'm going to ask you about right now, but is there a list somewhere of all of the projects that have been offered brownfields since
There is.
1997?
There is. We're on brownfield 75, roughly 70, 75, and it goes all the way back till about 20-plus years. And some of them are no longer active, some of them didn't take place, some of them are still active, but yes, we have that list.
And you have the information, too, on which ones have come back on the tax rolls?
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
Can you share that with me, or is that on the website?
It's not on the website, but I can get it for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Actually, if you also look in the information provided, there is the revenue coming in from the brownfields that is in that material.
In the budget material, yes. Every year, we have various active plans, and there's revenue comes in, $1 is captured, $1 of new taxes, a certain percentage of that goes back to reimbursing the developer or ourselves if we lend money to it. And then a small percentage goes into our local revolving fund to help additional other things, for instance, like Rotary Park, but more likely to help kind of prime the pump to get other sites redeveloped. We typically pay for a site assessment to find out what the problem is, but it's a very useful fund to have. And So those are listed in the budget, and it shows you, each year what percent goes into those particular funds. They show up in the EDC budget too. So get back to the project, so the YMCA project finally is coming out of the ground. Oliver Towers is a brownfield. Capitol Corner Market is a brownfield. We also have one of our facade improvement, and it also is a brownfield too. I think we spent some money on site assessment, is the Reach Studios on South Washington. And I think I mentioned the Lake Trust. But the brownfield program has been a great success. It's really changed the face of Lansing, and we've done over 75 plans. Moving on, though, to the Lansing Tax Increment Finance Authority, the TIFA. The TIFA was created back in '82, and it's really a tax increment area that's focused on the downtown. And what it does is, since '82, the increase in tax value in the downtown area captures that, and that money can be used then to finance public assets that promote economic development. And for instance, the parking system is in part being financed by that. The Lansing Center, the original Lansing Center, plus the expansion of the Lansing Center were financed that way, and we continue to pay debt on that. There's also the city-county court complex, Grady Porter building that was financed with this tool. And then we also had funds available to make improvements on North Washington Square. We were able to use money. At one time, there was a mall in that area that was left over from the 70s when the whole thing was a mall. And we used our funds to be able to do that, to pull that out so that people could drive through there and open that up for traffic, essentially. So, but really what this does is it captures not only the city's taxes, but more importantly, it captures all taxing units. So when I looked at it before, over $100 million of money that the city would not have had has come in with the TIFA to help pay for these assets. So it's really, truly a good tool for the city of Lansing. And, we've had challenges with the TIFA because at one time, the TIFA was bringing in $5.5 million a year. And of course, we structured the debt service such so that we were using that to pay on these assets. But then we had the financial real estate crash. At the same time, the state of Michigan bought several key buildings in the downtown, and our revenue went from $5.5 million to $2.5 million. And so, but our bills stayed the same. But the good news is we were able to refund or refinance several times, and Angie's been instrumental in that. And we just recently completed the last of the refunding, and now it looks good in terms of we have not had to borrow or ask the city to cover any of those payments. And going forward, if you look even in the TIFA budget, you'll see that the capture in the TIFA is now going back up. And a lot of these downtown projects, you can say, well, originally it's like, yeah, they're getting a tax rate, but ultimately they come off the rolls too. And at the same time, we get an appreciation of property. And then a lot of the problem is that the real estate is, the value is frozen. You can only increase so much, or the rate of inflation, and so that hurts. But when those properties are sold, then it jumps back up. So we have long-run projections for the TIFA, and those look really good. We hope to get to the point where we can actually then start using some of that. We'll have extra revenue to finance some other public asset. In the TIFA plan, we have City Hall, Performing Arts Center. There's several things in there that we could use that money on. But the top priority has been to be able to pay and make the obligations that were originally made by the TIFA and fight our way through this decline in revenue and come out the other side. And we have, and things are looking better.
Vice President Spatafor.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to circle back real quick. I took a look at the information you were sharing. It's good information. It's not exactly what I was looking for, though.
Okay.
Just the historical projects, which no longer may be capturing revenue, but which have come back on the tax rolls. So thank you, just to clarify.
Yep. So that is the TIFA. Turning to page 6, as far as our request in the next year's budget. So what we're doing, we're asking for $300,000, which has been unchanged. It's been roughly that amount for the last couple of years. That comes from the city, and that goes to the EDC. And then the EDC in turn contracts with LEAP, but that's $300,000 for economic development services. And then we also have the facade improvement program, and this program has been a great success because if you remember, it started out at $15,000 as just a pilot program, but it was so successful that last year council bumped it up to $150,000, and this year it's been bumped up another $25,000 to $175,000. So it's been a really great program, and it's really, most of the projects are small, but they have big impact. And they're out in areas, throughout the city. We've focused last year on things that were not downtown, and there's quite a few of them. And geographically, I think they're spread pretty well throughout the city. So those total up to the 300 and the 175 to 475. And then moving to page 7, so the mechanics of how it works is that money would go to the LEDC. The LEDC contracts with the city for economic development services, and then they turn around and contract with LEAP to provide those services. Also, we have the LBRA and the TIFA, they have they're separate entities too, and so they're a part of it. So you have, the EDC is contracting with LEAP, but then as part of that contract is to provide staff services to run the Brownfield Authority and the TIFA. And those contracts are currently being reviewed by the city attorney. And then, so turning then to page 8, as far as, the successes we've had over the last year. And we've had approximately 19 projects in the city. And some are big, some are small, but when you add them all up, it's about $217 million of private investment. And the projects will create about 770 new jobs and retain 65 jobs. And then on page 9 and on page 10, we have a little more detailed what those projects are, what the private investment and the jobs numbers are for them, and the totals at the end of page 10. So that's my presentation. Be happy to answer questions on it. I do want to mention that in your handout, we do have a more detailed, in your packet, we have a more detailed handout, which is our 2018 annual report. We went ahead and updated some of the numbers, so it's like 2018 plus a little bit, just to update it, because we operate at LEAP on more like the calendar year, but because of the city and the EDC is more on the fiscal year. So it's it contains a lot of great information. It really goes into good detail on the corridor improvement authorities, the facade program, and the opportunity zones. And as Chris mentioned too, if you go to our website, there's a lot of information on there too.
Okay, are there any other questions at this time? My question would be under salaries. Last year, you were budgeted 155, and this year you're looking at 216. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the economic development, planning department, and not your budget. Sorry about that. So you guys didn't get a raise, so.
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But we're willing to take one.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Councilmember Dunbar.
You. As Councilmember Spatafor and I are sitting over here looking at these numbers, trying to figure out money in versus money out, and what has come back on the rolls from brownfields, like what we are bringing in now from the capture that is no longer going out in reimbursements. I'm trying to understand on 119 and 120 of the budget pages. For the 2018-19 budget, expenses and revenue are static. So it's $5,132,268 in expenses and exactly the same in revenue, and pretty much the same thing under proposed budget for 19-20. But for 2017-18, expenses were only $1,872,000 and revenue was $2,497,000. And so I'm trying to figure out, was that a year where we actually had more come back on as opposed to being reimbursed? And why is the
I
difference?
believe you're looking at the brownfield budget? Is that
I
what you're
am.
looking at? Okay.
I am.
Chris can answer that.
Thank you. So yeah, the capture is going to vary year to year depending on what projects come online. Also, if you'll notice, the 2018-19 budget, we had an MDEQ grant and loan that accounted for $1 million of that budget as well, that increase. So not all of the items on here are strictly tax capture, since that was a grant given to the Brownfield Authority and then to the developer. So that goes through the Brownfield Authority as well. So that takes a lot of the increase. It just depends, like I said, what plans are coming online. We've had some bigger plans come online in the last few years. So it just depends on what gets accounted for in what year.
Okay, so that I can understand this, like and I'm gonna go backwards because it's the easiest thing for me to do. The 2017-18, there's an Oliver Towers amount for 28,000 in expenditures, and there's an Oliver Towers amount on the prior page for 28. So the assumption there is that they paid those taxes in, and the expense was made to reimburse them for eligible activities. So if there isn't a one-to-one match, if there isn't a way to match the expenditures name by name with a counterpart on the other side, can we assume if there's if there's revenue without a corresponding expenditure to the same company, that is indeed a tax capture come offline that we are now seeing in the benefit
So this
of?
budget will only account for tax capture. Per plan on each of these, what that is representing is the capture that went to either reimburse that developer or to reimburse an accounts receivable associated with that plan. So those are strictly the numbers there. Any of the additional revenues via admin or our local brownfield fund or separate line items on here. So they should match up. Is there any specific one that you're?
Well, like, okay, so like and again, I'm working backwards here, but say Michigan Avenue Investors, 24,000, that's like halfway down the page on revenues. When you flip over to the other side, Michigan Avenue Investors for the actual, and this is 17-18, is nothing. There's no reimbursement out, there's no expenditure out that corresponds with it. So do I assume that that means that was a capture that's now just considered profit or,
Yeah.
not?
So in that case, I'd have to look back at the specific plan, but capture and reimbursement to the developer has ceased. Depending on how the plan was written, sometimes so we take a portion to admin, a portion to our local brownfield fund. Some plans are written percentage each year, which accumulate to the statutory cap on that, which is 5 years. Or some of the older plans, possibly this one, at the last 5 years of capture, the last year or two, or however the plan was written, goes to either admin or the local brownfield fund. I can't recall specifically what this is, but if it's not budgeted, then capture is most likely ceased to the developer.
Chris,
But I can-
if you could look into that and get that information back, I would appreciate it. We really need to move on to our next one. Councilmember Dunbar, are you done? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and we will be now taking up Mr. Keith, if you would please come forward. Those that are watching or in the audience, we are still in committee of a whole, and we will complete the Lansing Entertainment and Public Facilities Authority, and then we have some other council business to take up for the city clerk, who has been patiently waiting. We will put you on the 6th. Pardon? Oh, it's before the election. Well, maybe we'll move you to the 13th, since it's just before the election, okay? We're good. Thank you. Scott?
Good evening, Council President Wood,
Good evening.
Council Vice President Spatafor, and distinguished Lansing City Council members. With me tonight is our Finance Director, Jennifer McFatridge, if she has questions with the budget directly, as well as what we prepared in your packet as a presentation. This year's presentation will be focused on the budget, highlights, goals for FY 1920. This current year has been a year of growth and change as we continue to focus on moving forward in a progressive manner. We've been focusing on training of staff, reviewing our facilities, reimagining our brand, and continuing to innovate to meet our customers' needs. We're also looking for opportunities to demonstrate our value to the city and to the region. Starting with the Groesbeck Golf Course highlights, I'm proud to say that we not only met the goals set in operating Groesbeck Golf Course in our first year, but we exceeded them. The new entrance and welcoming customer service elements we've added have improved the overall customer experience and led to increased usage of the golf course. The new online tee reservation system, it ties in with our website and also our point of sale, making it a seamless pattern from booking your tee time all the way through paying for it. This has not only improved the system, but it's helped to maximize potential revenue because we can put people in tight groups that we've never done before. Leagues have increased, play has increased, the number of passes sold has increased, and we've also increased some of the offerings that we have out there. Overall, that's led to an increase in revenues. The course looks its best in years, and the staff have really bought into reviewing every opportunity for improvement. I can't say enough about the staff that's been hired at Groesbeck. They've set out to improve the expectations and customers' experiences, and they've hit on every mark that we set for them. This year, we're going to look to add an outdoor deck component that'll add for additional outings and events, and then we'll continue to look for alternative revenue options for the golf course. This past year, we bought a simulator so that we could use it in the wintertime in the clubhouse, and we exceeded all of our sales goals in the first 3 months of operating it. So it was a very much success in purchasing, and we're going to look to enhance those additional winter season offerings like leagues and so forth. The Lansing Center highlights, the Lansing Center's continued to look for ways to improve our customer service, our safety, and our sustainability. New customer surveys with an emphasis on working towards exceeding our customer experiences and expectations, along with continued training of staff on safety and security, on customer service. We did a particular training on guest interaction with those with autism and sensory needs. We've continued our importance of reducing our waste, partnering this year with the MDEQ on the first ever zero waste event to be held in Lansing. We also continue to partner with the Greater Lansing Food Bank and donated over 17,000 pounds of reusable food to those in need in our community. According to the latest PricewaterhouseCoopers report on convention centers, we continue to exceed the national average for space occupancy for similar-sized convention centers in a similar-sized market by almost 9%. This coming year, we are looking for ways to partner on new events and activities outside the Lansing Center. This past year, we had Margarita Fest, the Whiskey Warmer. We're going to look to add to that along the riverfront gazebo plaza of the Lansing Center or in the new Rotary Park. The addition of Silver Bells will not only add and complement the growing events that our organization is looking forward to. Cooley Law School Stadium's highlights. While it was quite an exciting year for the stadium, and I mean stadium, the reference to using the term ballpark can no longer be used. We are a multi-purpose stadium with the addition of the Lansing Ignite, Michigan's first professional soccer team. The stadium held over 300,000 attendees to games last year and events, and it was an increase of almost 4%. We hosted the Midwest League All-Star Game for the second time in the stadium's history, and the stadium field was named the Midwest League Field of the Year. Additionally, per cap spending, which is what people spend when they come to the events there, also increased by an approximate 3%, which led to the increase in the economic impact. The safety netting was extended per minor league baseball standards to the end of the dugouts. If you haven't had an opportunity to check out the Lansing Ignite match, you should check the schedule and certainly come down and see the World's game in a new environment in our city. Also, in about a month from now, the I Love the 90s concert is coming to the stadium, again, demonstrating the multi-purpose use of the stadium. Some highlights from Common Ground. Common Ground continues to attract attendees and visitors from not only inside our region, but certainly from outside. We've had over 58% of tickets purchased outside of our region, which again increases the economic impact. When they come into town, they stay overnight, they have a meal, et cetera. We continue to see the tickets purchased outside the region, again, talking about the economic impact of the festival. And then the other part that we saw this year, Halsey, one of our performers, had just recently broke up with G-Eazy. And it got such national attention that every article mentioned not only Common Ground Music Festival, but Lansing, Michigan, which is a significant way of getting free publicity when an artist has a significant issue in her life and she broke down on stage. I can't even tell you the number of People Magazine, everything had it, and it was a ton of free publicity for us. This year, I'm excited about one of the most diverse and inclusive lineups ever. Brandi Carlile, a recent Grammy Award winner, is performing, and she's headlining Bonnaroo, Summerfest, and Boston Calling, 3 of the largest festivals in the country. And with her that night is City and Color, Robert Randolph and the Family Band, and more. It's gonna be a great night. Friday night, Zedd, who just headlined Coachella and brought Katy Perry on stage with him, and Playboi Carti are performing on Friday night. Zedd is all over pop radio. His collaborations have been #1 hits. Saturday night is Cole Swindell, Chris Janson, and Tracy Lawrence, night of country music. And then on Sunday, we wrap out with some exciting hip-hop performers, YG, Big Boy, 2 Live Crew. So we're looking forward to this year and a great event again. Part of Common Ground this year is the I Love the 90s show at the stadium. So we often hear about change and growth, and while they are interchangeable, one doesn't necessarily warrant the other. One can have change without growth. And there's the old business adage that states the worst phrase in business is because we've always done it that way. So LEFA continues to strive to seek out new opportunities and to challenge ourselves, focusing on growth. Some of our numbers will reflect that, as you see in the presentation. We remained flat in our Lansing Center operating contribution. We reduced the gross spec operating contribution. We eliminated the city market operating contribution, and we only increased the stadium operating contribution to reflect the addition of the Lansing Ignite. Our capital requests are items of immediate concern or obligation via contract. Starting with the Lansing Center budget request, it's remained flat from the previous years. While utilities and labor costs are increasing, we have worked hard over the last few years to maintain our healthcare costs while working to increase the revenues. We do expect to see an increase in rental, food and beverage, and sponsorship revenues. Our capital requests this year are for items that cannot wait. The balcony repair on the west side, the river side of the building, we repaired half of it about 4 years ago. The other half is sinking and we need to replace it. Additionally, our air conditioning system, the cooling tower, was put in about 13 years ago. It needs to be replaced before it fails. We've had a couple of the water trays fail, and we need to replace that before they all fail, specifically during an event, if we had a large event over the summer that required a lot of air conditioning. Cooley Law School Stadium budget overview. Our stadium budget request is for additional operating contribution to reflect the addition of the Lansing Ignite. The additional utility costs, maintenance costs, and other miscellaneous expenses are due to the anticipated 20 to 30% increase in activity at the stadium. The capital requests are for structural repairs for the stadium. Additionally, in there you'll see a reserve fund is being established for the anticipated replacement of the turf, which will need to be replaced at a sooner timetable now that we have 2 teams playing in there and using that turf. So it will need to be replaced faster than it did the last time. So we're putting in a reserve fund. Groesbeck Golf Course budget overview. The budget request for Groesbeck Golf Course is reduced by 10%. The continued increase in revenues is offsetting additional increases in expenses, with a goal of ongoing reductions in the operating contribution for the golf course. We're going to work with the Parks and Rec to fund a new exterior deck space that could increase additional outings and events. And the capital request, I know there were some questions on that, is to align the 3 different irrigation systems into one more modern system for some improved efficiencies, cost savings, and improved irrigation. The cart path talked about is relaying a portion of the cart path that will allow for more cart usage. We actually are running out of space for the number of carts needed out there, which is a good thing. Business is up. Talking about our FY 19-20 goals, we're not done looking for ways to improve, whether it's reducing the operating contributions of the city or improving the entertainment offerings and venues we manage. There's a facility audit currently being completed at the Lansing Center, which will provide a thorough review of the facility, its needs, and the anticipated costs to update the facility and keep our convention center competitive in the market. This will be a high priority at the facility as needing some significant improvements to maintain its designation as one of the premier convention and event spaces in the state. We are continuing to face convention competition from other markets that would like to secure our customers. Port Huron recently opened a conference center, Kalamazoo is looking at it, and Novi continues to expand. We also are looking for options for regional funding, naming rights, and alternative funding revenues that can help offset or eliminate the operating contribution of the city for the Lansing Center. We're exploring improved branding options for LEPFA and its events and properties. We will continue to be a catalyst for economic development and will partner with other organizations and companies for local and regional economic growth. Looking at our performance measures. These performance measures reflect what was previously stated. We reduced the operating contribution from the city for the golf course from over $544,000 2 years ago to $143,000 this past year, a 73% reduction. Our rounds of golf have nearly doubled. Our goal was 21,000, we exceeded 29,000. Our operating revenues went to 483,000, and our operating expenses were held at 246,000. We will continue to work to meet these measurables. Other performance measures. Lansing Center occupancy, we continue to hold a high mark, over 50%, about 9% above the national average, as I mentioned. Room nights, this is something that's very important to our hoteliers, and as a new hotel comes in, it certainly shows the efforts we've made. Room nights are still significantly high, with a 2-year average of almost 25,000 room nights. And then we talk about our sustainability efforts. We've made a conscious effort to reduce our waste going to the landfill, and you can see that we've almost donated 65,000 pounds to recycled products.
I'm
And then
going to
broke that
interrupt
down.
you, Mr. Keith, Vice President Spatafor.
Sure. Thank you for all good information and good news. One thing that stuck with me, I'm trying to string together regional funding and room nights. Does the Lansing Center currently receive any type of bed tax, any type of offset for those nights?
Yes, we currently get, we're capped through the CVB, through a Public Act 25, so it's a marketing assessment that actually covers the entire region, not just Ingham County. And I think next year we're capped at 400,000.
Okay, so that can't go up. That's not one of the regional funds you're exploring?
Yes, there are some other opportunities that we're looking at involving with the county.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
I talked about the stadium having over 300,000 attendees for the 23rd consecutive year and the 4% increase in attendance at the stadium. And then I always love to share economic impact numbers. It increased slightly. Some of that was due to just changes in the inflation rate, but we still saw an additional $1.3 million in economic impact for our city and our region through the different activities that we're involved with. This economic impact is really important when we're having discussion about funding options around the region, and we like to point this out. Lastly, I just want to say thank you again for your time and deliberating over the budget and your commitment to our city and making our region better. As we continue to seek a broader perspective for LEPFA, one that should include regional funding for a regional asset, We understand that change is due. A change that will take our organization and its facilities or events towards the next step of growth. There's an old Chinese proverb that states, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. We're looking forward to building some more windmills. Come join us.
All right, thank you. And just again, for the public that has tuned in for us, we are still in committee of a whole and do have some other items to continue to take care of. At this time, we're opening up for questions for Mr. Keith. Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't have so much of a question as much as a comment. I am so pleased with what I've seen in the last few years moving forward. And thank you for looking at more of a regional approach to support these assets. You know, we've had this discussion at the LUPFA meetings. We've got to do something to update that conference center. I don't think people understand how critically important it is. I'm the one that always says there is absolutely no wow factor at that conference center. I mean, you walk in there and it is boring. And we do have to compete. We have to compete with Grand Rapids. We have to compete with so many different places. And I think this is an asset that we absolutely must find money for, to update, to make larger. We are going to have some really great hotels in the area, and we need to position ourselves to get that economic impact. And the Lansing Center is going to be crucial. So whatever money you can get to put into there, not just, I mean, of course, maintenance, but we have to do much, much more than just maintenance with that Lansing Center, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And yes, I do recall your statements at our board meeting that yes, a wow factor is definitely needed. And we have to stay competitive. As these facilities and hotels are coming downtown, they're going to have an expectation that we have a facility that's presentable for them to attract guests. So yes, we have to stay competitive and look the look that we need.
Councilmember Hussein.
To that end, I know we're contracting with the M3 group right now to explore corporate naming, sponsors' rights, or whatever that is. Where are we at with that?
We are, we're having, you know, I share with my board, it's kind of like marriage. You first start dating, then you start courting, then you start, you know, engagement. So we're probably somewhere between, you know, dating and engagement. We've got to get to know the person, the group that we're talking to. We've been having conversations with anywhere from 4 to 5. A couple have dropped off. You know, certainly Como just went through and announced their naming rights deal. I think that will help us because it kind of sets the bar a little bit and lets people know that, you know, convention centers are kind of they are a space. We are currently, we have a product that is tracking all the media mentions and all the times that the Lansing Center is in the press. And it gives us information that we can use in discussions with potential naming rights partners to say, you know, this is how many times you would be in the press, or this is how many times the governor visits our building, or this is how many unique events we have, or number of people we have. So it gives us good information that we can present to them. So we're in the process of sitting down with about 3 different entities right now regularly and giving them information that they request and as they look at it.
Go ahead.
And I just think if we strike the right deal with the right partner, I mean, you know, obviously the influx of cash will help, but also in terms of branding and pull, I think it's incredibly important. I also know that we are coming up on the end of our naming rights deal with Cooley. Are we looking at a successor agreement? Are we looking at different partners? What are we doing there?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. There are some successor agreement options, but we also have some current people who might step up to that next level. They may say, if they're not interested, we will take over. So we have a little bit of both of those.
Are there other questions for Mr. Keith? A couple of things I have for you. First of all, understanding that we don't have a subsidy for the city market, there has to be some expenses happening. The building isn't just doing nothing. So there has to be utilities and things like that. Where is that coming from?
Currently, it's coming out of our, what we had in reserves and what we're getting in rent. So between those two things, we're covering those costs. However, it's running dangerously thin. We have regular conversations with Ms. Bennett about that because, we need to know when that transition's gonna happen. We hope to know something by the end of May. And when our last tenant is no longer in the building, we will turn over the keys and the building completely to the city at that point.
Has there been any thought of doing leasing for events versus necessarily any long-term leasing, but, for a day event or things like that that could be extended with things from the Lansing Center as activities are happening with conferences and conventions with that?
Yes, so we have done that one time so far. The challenge now with Rotary Park's construction going on is very limited parking and access. So it'll be a little bit more challenging moving forward until whenever the resolution happens.
And so maybe this question for the mayor's office, has there been any determination on where we're going with the city market yet? And can you give us any idea?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, until we fully resolve the current legal situation, we've been holding off on that. We have was 42 days from the decision. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott.
Yeah, from the Court of Appeals decision, and Jim has been kept in the loop, that 42 days till the next step takes place.
So the next step takes place. So we've just been holding off, honestly, and until that matter is resolved, we aren't really able, in a position where we can move forward.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney.
The Court of Appeals in the case upheld the Circuit Court's decision upholding the termination of the current lease. Under the court rules, the plaintiff, that's the current tenant, the current tenant has 42 days from the date of that decision to appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court. During that 42 days, the current stay of proceedings continues, so the tenant can stay in that location for 42 days. If no appeal is filed, or if an appeal, it's not an automatic appeal, it's a request for an appeal to the Supreme Court. So if either the Supreme Court says we're not hearing it, or there is no request for appeal filed, then at the end of the 42 days, the Court of Appeals decision is effective and the tenancy would be terminated.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Keith, we had received a communication from Mr. Alexander, and you did respond to that. Can you briefly go over he had made some budget suggestions and concerns. Can you briefly
Oh,
go over
gosh, I'm gonna
those?
try to remember. You may have to help me with it. He just had some concerns about the budget request, and it was a significant request that we just, we can't do at this point. It's not a priority. We will continue to look at ways to fund capital improvements, and, always look at the priorities of those capital improvements. We sit down with the teams and the city and come up with a plan based on what the contract obligates, and we will continue to do that.
And can you remind us what the contract obligates on a yearly basis?
I think this year we asked the minimum amount, so 75,000, I would believe that.
Okay.
Do we increase it, though? The number 75, yeah.
That's the minimum.
Yeah, that's 75,000 this year. I think in 2 years, it jumps up again to 100,000.
Okay. There was a recent survey that was done. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So one of the things that we were looking at, again, is, LEPFA is a challenging acronym and many times misunderstood. What do we do? And when you try to use that acronym or even say it out all the way fully, it's still very confusing. So we wanted to get a feel from people if they knew what LEPFA was, knew what we did, and if they felt that name resonated as connection. So we're looking at that as a possible branding option, especially if we do receive some other funding model that could get us, something that explains exactly what we do. So we wanted to get feedback on that. And we got some really great feedback, and it actually did point us in some new directions that we do need to better explain what we do and what we are and what the organization represents.
How are you addressing some of the critical things that were part of that?
Well, I think, as we attract and do more events like Silver Bells and more public events that people are coming down to, Margarita Fest, et cetera, the Grand Concert Series, they can understand that we are involved in entertainment and venues and things for them to do. And then hopefully, if it all works and comes to fruition, we may branch out of the downtown area and start doing more activities in other areas so that we can, again, become a little bit more diverse in what our offerings are around the city.
Are there any other questions? We want to thank you, and I have a couple more, but what I'll do is make sure that staff gets those, and then if you can follow up on those, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, thank you. That takes us into the Community Development Block Grant Action Plan. Mr. Kalhanick, if you would please come down. If you could explain to us where we are and is the green light on? If the green light is not,
It is on now.
now
It
you
is on
can be
now.
heard.
I'll be very quick. I was here a few weeks ago. I said that we didn't have our award yet from HUD. We now do have our award from HUD. Later than they should give it to us, but earlier than they've given it to us in the last couple of years, so that's good. But I haven't done the resolution, so it's not ready for passage yet, okay? We did get the award. It is, unfortunately, our home grant did go down. By the way, if you recall from our previous discussion, we don't have any control over this. This is, HUD follows a strict formula based on partially on population and then on some other factors. We don't have any control over it. The home grant did go down $87,670. However, the CDBG went up a tiny little bit, about $1,600, and ESG went up about $2,600. So it is my intention to revise that resolution with these numbers, so you'll have real numbers, and as well as I believe the summary sheet that you had previously. So you'll have that and get that to you as quick as I can, so you'll be able to vote on it next time.
Okay, it was my understanding that because you're doing an amendment on the 2018-2019 plan, that we can't pass this one until that amendment is done. Am I?
Right, that factors into this a bit. That's more of a practical consideration. However, as a practical matter, we can't even submit our action plan until the amendment is complete. And I believe the public comment process for that amendment is open until Friday, technically. Okay. So we can't, even if you acted tonight, it's not like we can submit our action plan tomorrow. It just has to wait.
Okay. So we're not going to have any action on this until you get a revised resolution to us?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Kalhanick on this item? Okay, Mr. Kalhanick, I'm going to have you move over one chair.
Oh.
And I'm going to have move up Rhonda, since you were here. And Rhonda Overland is here to speak on the Red Cedar floodplain remapping special assessment public hearing. If council members remember, we had passed a resolution, we had passed in committee of a whole a resolution to set the public hearing for May 13th. There were questions and concerns that were talked about at the mayor's brown bag. concerning how this would affect some of the residents in some of the lower income areas and the effect that it would have on them. We had asked the administration, and it was a suggestion from the administration that maybe some community development block grant dollars could be used on the residential portions on this. Since then, we received information back from the mayor's chief of staff stating that community development block grant dollars could not be utilized for this. So we have Ms. Overland here to discuss the Red Cedar floodplain remapping. You have the document in your packets, and City TV has it. So we'll have her go through that first, and then we will open it up for questions.
Thank you.
Rhonda.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I will go through this very quickly. I know that you're past time. A few years ago, in the course of another project, we learned that our flood map is actually, base flood elevation is actually shown 3 feet too high on the Red Cedar River. So there are people in the floodplain shown in the floodplain who are actually not in the floodplain, and there are people who are paying too much for their flood insurance. So the goal of this project is to correct those flood maps. So there's a brief history on slide 2 of some of the flood insurance impacts, but I want to skip right to slide 3, which shows a map of those impacts. 3 of these neighborhoods are Red Cedar neighborhoods. The 4th is just for reference, but you can see the impacts specifically on Baker and Urbandale. And at the bottom, you'll see the average payment in each one of these flood insurance premium in each one of these neighborhoods today, the payment that they will be making in 10 or 15 years when actuarial rates are reached for the flood insurance program. And then the last line is the payment that the average payment once we correct the flood maps. So you can see there's a savings of about $1,000 a year for each one of these, in each one of these neighborhoods. There's another summary here that shows that our low-income neighborhoods are going to be the hardest hit by flood insurance. Houses under $50,000 are more likely to lose 100% of their resale value, and what that means is that the flood insurance premium for a buyer with a mortgage would be equal to the projected mortgage payment for the home that they're buying. So it will be very difficult to sell these homes when the time comes. So the second to the last slide is a kind of a map of the project, and it lays out the way that the remapping would work. The Corps of Engineers would be doing the work. They know that they have to go as far as the eastern edge of Meridian Township, but they aren't sure they have to go further. If they have to do all the way to Weberville, the project will be $363,000. If they don't, the project will only be $172,000, but we won't know that until they've started. And then at the back page, the last slide, is a breakdown of the project cost. And you can see there's 50% of the project will be publicly funded through municipal government. There's also contributions by the USGS, Michigan State University, Lansing Board of Water and Light, and then 50% of the project would be funded by the assessment to the Red Cedar property owners and the city of Lansing. And there's a breakdown there that shows you residential versus commercial. The commercial property owners are actually the largest contributing group. They pay 37% of the project. And then at the very bottom where it says non-CDBG and CDBG, that just means those are non-CDBG eligible neighborhoods and CDBG eligible neighborhoods.
All right, I have Councilmember Spatafor, then Councilmember Spitzley.
For the information, I've got a few questions. So you mentioned going farther towards Williamston. I assume those fees will not be, we're not talking about that. What we're looking at in front of us is the 112 plus 20 plus 48. That's the highest we're going to go from a cost?
For the assessment, this $363,000 assumes that they go all the way to Weberville.
Sure.
If they don't have to go that far, then we'll only be assessing for $90,000.
Okay.
Because everyone will be paying half of what you see here.
Gotcha. So I guess my question is, so what's the residential obligation in the city of Lansing? I see $20,000 and $48,000 for a total of $68,587. Is that a higher number than we should expect because that includes parcels not in the city?
No, this only includes parcels in the city.
Okay, so the residents in the city, the 50% you're talking about is half of 68,000
Yes.
approximately. So I guess the questions for the council is, we can probably find that in the budget to cover that. Is that an option? I know we've all talked about wanting to.
I think there are a number of options. I think there's the option of whether there is money in the upcoming budget, whether there is any residuals that will be in the budget that we're concluding the 18 fiscal year 18-19.
So we can look in the budget then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President, and I agree with Councilmember Spatafor. I think that, as we are looking at some of the neighborhoods that are most financially challenged in the city of Lansing, I think we should try to look for funding to provide them with some relief. I have a couple questions. So you talk about on page the problem of flood insurance. So you said the average Lansing annual flood insurance premium today is $1,100.
Correct.
What's the percentage of residents in those areas that have flood insurance right now?
Citywide, it's 20%. But the
In that area, not citywide.
it's actually higher. It's 20%, I think, in Urbandale. At the citywide, I think it's 18%. I misspoke. But in Urbandale, it's 20%. In Baker, it's probably less.
Okay.
I can get you those numbers, though.
No, I think that's generally, and I appreciate that. That's generally what I wanted to. I mean, and we've talked about this, and so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but only roughly 20% of these people have flood insurance because they can't afford it.
Right.
And so, when I get the numbers, but when you're talking about an average savings of $800 per household, they can't afford the flood insurance now. Only 20% of them have flood insurance. So I don't think they're really, that's not their primary concern, that they're going to save $800 15 years down the road.
Agreed.
And so, I understand the importance of doing this, but I think that as a city and as a council, we have to recognize the challenges in that neighborhood. And, it benefits everybody to have an accurate flood map. But I'm just concerned that it's, on the backs of the neighborhoods that are most challenged. And so I would ask that we really try to find a way to fund this. I still, and I think I'd sent the email, and it was probably too late. I'm still not understanding why, because we have, this thing, it says non-CBDG and CBDG eligible, but we got the email back that says none of it's CBDG eligible. So I need to know what's the issue with that.
And if you could pass that down to Don. Don, can you please address why these are not eligible for, under the public service portion of the community development block grant, why these wouldn't fall into that?
Well, it wouldn't be public service, it'd be public improvement.
Public improvement.
And as you know, as I know you well know, we can't spend CDBG funds on just anything, and we have to follow rules. So we went and looked at the rules. And when it comes to paying special assessments on behalf of residents, obviously they would have to qualify, but in particular, HUD only provides that we can do that for special assessments that I would characterize as brick and mortar assessments, such as streets, waters and sewers, curbs, gutters, that kind of thing. Not this kind of special assessment.
Your follow-up?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So the floodplain water issue for flooding doesn't come under what you're saying. You said you can only use it for water, so can you expand on what the water definition?
No, I didn't say water. I thought I said water or sewer lines.
Oh, okay.
Like a water line, underground water line delivering water somewhere.
Okay, because I didn't hear the line part.
I'm sorry.
Maybe I misheard, so I apologize if I did that. That's it for me,
Okay.
Madam President.
All right, Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'm going to be honest, I don't care where you find the money. I am absolutely against assessing these people for this money. I went through the rolls. I know some of these people, $100 will really kill them. And if it goes on their tax rolls, then it affects their mortgage. If they have a mortgage, it never goes off. And I think some of us can not really understand how much that really is to some people. These are my absolute most challenged areas in my ward. And as far as saving $800 on their flood insurance, makes me laugh. If you think they can afford flood insurance, think again. That's why only 20%, 80% don't have it, and there's a reason. And you're right, in the Baker-Denora area, it will be less. On top of this, we're going to have a sinking fund going to them shortly. We're raising our recycling fees. We're adding more and more and more to people that are so financially stressed, and then we wonder why they're losing their houses to tax foreclosure. So I would ask my colleagues on behalf of the First Ward residents in Urbandale, in Baker-Denora. I see we have Sycamore Park and Tecumseh River. I'm not sure there is, that's those are financially stressed areas as much as my two areas. But please help me find the money in our budget somewhere to pay for this, because our folks can't afford it in these areas, plain and simple. You can give me all the reasons in the world why it's going to save them money. It's not. It's not going to save them money. And I can tell you what, $100 to some people is a lot of money. $180 is even more. So I just absolutely will not ever support assessing these folks for this kind of activity.
Okay, I have a couple of procedural questions. I'm not sure who's going to be able to answer me on these. In order to move forward, we would need to have on the agenda tonight the setting the public hearing for May 13th with the idea of passage for May 20th so that it can go on the assessment rolls and be to the assessor for June 1st. None of us have said that we have any objection to the commercial properties section of this. But if we were to set a public hearing and try to look for a way through the administration to come up with those funds to offset the residential, would we have to have the residential piece still on the assessment roll for the public hearing?
So I'm not sure, but I think I believe there's a legal question here, because under the special assessment statute, my understanding is that we have to assess everyone in the district, all the benefiting properties, both commercial and residential, but I don't know and would defer to legal. So I don't know how to answer that question without knowing the answer to that second question.
Mr. City Attorney?
I'll have to look into that issue.
Okay, what I need you to look into is whether, one, we have to assess all the affected properties, or whether we're able to differentiate ones that the city would pick up the cost on. Two is in setting the public hearing, which would have to happen tonight, would be the fact that we would be listing all those residential properties.
Well, you can set the public hearing and list all of them, but the final action would be your decision after the public hearing.
I get that. The only concern that I have is we would be out there telling people, there would be letters going to all these people that this will be a cost to them without explaining that we're trying to come up with a resolution to that.
Well, the public hearing notice would say that it's under consideration by council, right? And I think there is a public relations issue here, but I mean,
yes,
you don't know what the final decision is until you're going to vote on it, and the purpose of the public hearing is to take input, and the rest of it can be handled by publicity.
All right. Then my question question to Rhonda is, we have the option to do this or not do any assessment. Is this correct?
We have an option to, whether or not we choose to correct our floodplain and whether or not we choose to help our property owners. If we don't do the assessment, then that's half of the project that's not funded.
Okay, thank you. All right, so right now, is it on the, okay, right now, this is on the agenda for passage this evening. So, council, to set the public hearing. So council members can be thinking about that. We want to, I don't believe there's any other questions for you. Legal will be getting us those other information. We want to thank you. Thank you. Last piece of business that we have. Oh, yes. I'm sorry, we have two items. One is the Ways and Means that have to do with the Townsend ramp that is coming to Committee of the Whole. Would you like to go over that with us? This is the light blue tab. This is an appropriation. Angie?
Yes, okay, so you have the resolution in front of you. In late February, the Townsend ramp, as you know, was sold to the state of Michigan. And at the time, we mentioned that there was roughly $18 million in proceeds, just under $18 million in proceeds received from this state. We had outstanding bonds on the Townsend ramp, and so $12 million of that was used to pay off that outstanding debt, and that is completed. An additional $900,000 of the proceeds are being used to offset arrearages that were existed between with the state in terms of state employees and parking owed to the city. So $900,000 of the proceeds was used for that. So in front of you is a resolution to appropriate almost $2.2 million of the remaining proceeds. And there are a variety. I'm going to group them into two different groups. One would sort of be our non-vehicle capital equipment, and then our vehicular capital equipment. Now, these are one-time expenditures for a purposeful reason, as the mayor mentioned. I believe it was last week when it was introduced that these are one-time set of money. So we can't go using these monies that would build something into the budget that would be ongoing costs like personnel or something like that. In terms of capital non-vehicle purchases, we have fire department self-contained breathing apparatuses. Those are apparatus, I guess you'd say. Those are the breathing tanks that our firefighters have. We have a multi-year replacement policy on that, and so this is one increment of that multi-year phased purchase. The South Washington office complex, we have renovations proposed there for our fire department to be able to have some of their training take place over there and housed there. Citywide public safety camera replacements. Those are our existing cameras are quite old and they are in need of replacement. Also city website design and replacement, as well as citywide paperless initiative as we try to really get rid of the paper in City Hall and move to not only for storage purposes and the amount we pay for storage of our existing hard copies, so to speak, but also efficiencies in being able to look up information. There is kind of related to two items here, customer relationship management software and then interactive voice response system. Those are both customer service related. Those are items that will improve our ability to respond and track customer inquiries. We have a citywide survey software. Obviously, that's something that improves information flow back between the city and our residents. Digital signage for city announcement for employees that don't have computers. We do have some employees that don't have computers. By having some signage in the facilities, we can give updates and things when they're coming in and out. They can easily be seen. And this has been found to be more cost-effective than deploying individual accounts and things. And in a lot of cases, people wouldn't be accessing those accounts anyway because it's so infrequent that they need to. It was mentioned in the Human Resources budget presentation about a applicant tracking software that is also proposed within these proceeds, as well as a real-time crime center software for real-time crime center for LPD. And this would basically tie together data analysis and mapping, as well as cameras throughout the city, tying into being able to deploy officers in a real-time format. Then in addition to those items, we have proposed 2 ambulances, as well as 1 fire engine. And again, that comes to roughly $2.2 million, $2,171,000.
Okay, are there questions? Councilmember Spatafor.
Thanks, Angie. This leaves, am I reading the resolution right, $2.1 million of that sale unappropriated and not accounted for?
I'm sorry?
This leaves $2.1 million unaccounted, or not unaccounted for, unappropriated and not encumbered yet?
I believe so.
Okay.
Where did I put my figure? I had that.
It says in the resolution, I just want to make sure I was reading it
Yes.
correctly. Okay.
No, the 2.2 million is, I don't know where I just put it, I just had it. 2.2 million is what is being appropriated.
Right, but then 2.1 is,
Oh, 2.1, yes, I'm
Yep,
sorry,
okay.
2,171,000 is the unappropriated, I'm sorry about that, yes, yes, yes.
thank you, I just want to be clear. Thank you.
Are there other questions? Councilmember Hussein.
I just want to make clear, in case I'm reading something wrong, what we are appropriating is more like $2,882,000, correct?
Yes,
And what is
I'm
not
sorry, I had that background, the 2.2 million was the unappropriated, I apologize, yes.
Are there other questions? Seeing none. Vice President Spatafor, do we have a motion?
Madam President, I move the resolution for the supplemental appropriations for the revenue from the sale of the Townsend parking ramp.
Have a motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose. This will be on tonight, so if, no? Oh, okay, good. So you have until the 13th. There are questions that come up that you, as you're reviewing this, you'll have an opportunity to bring those up at we have 2 committee of the whole meetings before that we can discuss this. All right, thank you. The immediate action is under other, the late item. Samantha, would you like to address this one, please?
I would. Thank you, Madam President. The city, at the end of last year, was awarded a grant in the amount of $39,400 from the National Park Service to fund the Paving the Way project, which is a historical project that talks about the construction of I-496 and the impact that it had on the city of Lansing, in particular, to some of the African American community, that was affected by the construction of that. So Marilyn Plummer has been working on this, and the project has hired an executive director as part of the funds to work on the project. It's really working with the Historical Society, looking to be a really interesting and poignant project, art project that is, again, paid for by the National Park Service. And so this would ask you to accept that grant so we can continue to move forward on that.
Yes, Councilmember Washington.
Samantha, I just have a question. When this project is finished, what is the end result? A movie, a book, a building?
So my understanding is that there will be different visual panels throughout the community, but I apologize, I only know enough to be dangerous. Marilyn has really been the leader of this, but it says it will collect, interpret, and preserve stories and take positive action. So my understanding was that there would be certain panels in certain places you could go and visit. There will be some tours that will be happening. I know Marilyn's been talking about tours and things like that, so it's intended to be interactive, but I do not have all the details. I can bring those back to you, but it appears to be something really interesting, but I only know enough to be dangerous.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. The mayor's office is going to administer this grant, is that?
Marilyn has been the coordinator of the project, but the project has hired a director with these funds as part of the grant, and her name is Greta, and she'll be working with Marilyn and with the Historical Society. So we applied for the grant and got it, but the Historical Society is doing a lot of the legwork as well as Marilyn coordinating for our office.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Who's going to be paying for the So is this
It's all
grant-
part of the grant.
It's
grant
all
funded.
part of the
Everything
grant.
is grant funded. There's not a dime of city dollars that has gone to, it's all federal grant funded.
So the $51,000 is going to fund an executive director, and it's going to facilitate the pave the way and the storytelling?
The grant amount was the 50, or that was the amount that we're appropriating. I do not know exactly how much she's getting paid, or if the Historical Society is supplementing that in any way, I do not know. But all I know is that we need to accept the grant funds for part of the project, so I'm not sure exactly how much she's getting paid.
And are we supplementing her pay?
Nope.
Okay.
Vice President
Thank you.
Spatafor.
Sorry, real quick, the agreement that's with the resolution actually states the objectives. It's archiving oral histories and photographs and a film for the project for the Library of Michigan, creating a website with interactive Pave the Way with online maps and links, photos, a book created digitally with Amazon Create Space, a historical society exhibit on African American civil rights history in Lansing, and then a film that the city has agreed to co-edit into a 30-minute film with the video, the film, photographs, and locations and interviews. So there's quite a bit coming out of it, actually.
And Councilwoman Spitzley, if I may, the Historical Society is providing the match, so it will be matched by the Historical Society.
Are there any other questions? If you could just, again, explain to us why, as this is a late item, and why the fact that we need to take action on this immediately instead of letting it go through the normal process.
Thank you, Council President Wood. We, the executive director was hired, and the funds had not yet been appropriated, so she is actually working without being paid right now, and those will be volunteer hours, but it was something that we did not realize it had not yet been appropriated, and so Marilyn came to me at the end of last week, and we, the council president was gracious enough to take it up, thank you, so we can ensure that once this passes, she will be getting paid for the work that she is doing.
So are we all clear on why we are where we are today? All right. Vice President Spatafor.
Madam President, I move the resolution approving the acceptance of the office of grant. That doesn't make any sense in the resolution.
Acceptance of the grant and the appropriate accounts.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
But text is
We have a
wrong.
motion. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. This, Vice President Spatafor, will be a late item that you will have to introduce. With that, we are going to adjourn, and we will give us 2 minutes to stretch just for a moment, and then we will get on with our council meeting. Again, I do apologize for those that are in the audience that have a special ceremony and those that are watching at home. Thank you.